Okay, anybody will, I would very much like to do introductions, but we don't have the time for it today. But just to give you some idea, I'm going to just ask, because how many of you are here, sort of either you're connected to a makerspace of some kind, okay? So how many of you are here connected to a maker business of some kind, okay? How many of you here are from education or that informal or formal? Okay. How many of you here are from sort of related to sort of government agencies or things of that nature? Good. All right. You know, the goal of this Maker Summit today really is to provide some background and insight on the Maker movement for, and many cases, the best way to gain that insight is to talk to the people that just raised their hands. We are organizing a program here from about, we're a little bit late starting, 2:30 to 5:30. We'll have a reception afterwards, and I hope you'll just go around and talk to people about what they're doing and what their connection is, and learn from that. This was sort of driven by, you know, when the White House hosts a science fair, you know what a science fair is. When they host a maker fair, it's not always clear to everyone, what is this? What are makers, and why are they doing this? And rather than just describe an answer to you, I think one of the more interesting things is looking at what is the maker movement, what are its potential impacts on society in a variety of areas. Last December, along with the Deloitte Center for the Edge, was John Hagel here, along with John Seeley Brown, and where did Delisha go? There he is, Delisha Casoria. We organized about 20 folks, 25 people, to get together and think together about, well, what might be happening with this maker movement? What are the impacts in manufacturing, in retail, in education, government policy? And I think one of the real reasons we wanted to do this today is to release this report that we have up here, and John will be going through some of the ideas. This little card deck is sort of filled with sort of provocations or assertions that we hope you will think about, contribute to, and find reasons to you know, in your own context to understand what this means. So the goal here is really today to look at some of those impacts. We're going to be looking at education, innovation, and I think one of the things I'm really honored that John's here. He's really flies around the world talking about disruption and innovation, and to have his perspective really from outside looking in and say, what does this mean? You know, you're not invested in this in any particular way other than looking at disruptions, and does this fit patterns that are happening elsewhere in other industries? So John will lead us off, and Delisha, I was going to have you introduce him, but I kind of ran ahead with that. But I want to thank the Deloitte Center for the Edge in helping us do this. Before I give it over to John, we put up a number of resources back there that we've been developing, others have developing. Where's Phil? There's Phil. Phil edited an MIT journal on innovations and did a section on Making in America. And we have John Hagel's report on the maker movement, an article you wrote, a number of things. I think these are good resources to take back and think about. They usually find their ways into presentations inside of companies and agencies as well. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome John Hagel, and thank you for being here, John.
Great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. I've been on the edge of the maker movement for many, many years, and it's just been so impressive to see the growth of this movement over this time period. Not just growth, but accelerating growth and diversifying. I mean, over time, what makers are has taken on many different meanings. And I think that that's an exciting development that is going to have a profound impact on our economy and society. I find, though, that one of the interesting things with anything that takes off with this kind of speed is there are two tendencies that are quite natural and understandable. One is we have a tendency to look inward. Things are growing so rapidly that all we can do is focus on just connecting with the people who are around us and integrating them into this movement. So we tend to lose perspective about the rest of the economy and the rest of society. And at the same time, we tend to shrink our time horizons. In times of rapid growth, again, all you can do is just stay up with what's going on today, looking ahead 5, 10, 15 years. That's, you know, maybe if I have some free time someday, I'll do that. But it's really about what's happening now. And our interest in launching this initiative that Dale mentioned, this Maker Impact Summit, was to engage some of the key participants in the maker movement in fighting those two tendencies. Fighting that tendency to look inward, fighting that tendency to take a very short-term view of the world, and try to imagine what is the potential impact of this movement on broader economy and society over a longer period of time. Because we believe that with that kind of view, that kind of perspective, it can influence the choices and actions that we take today in some different ways. And so that was the goal of this Maker Impact Summit that we convened back in December. We brought together about 25 people, all of whom in one way or another had been very active in the maker movement from different kind of contexts, everything from large companies to small startups to maker spaces to government to education. But we wanted some diversity around the table. And we focused the discussion, again, on this, imagine where this could go over a long period of time. We ended up engaging in a series of scenario exercises to try to imagine alternative futures, what would be the key assumptions we'd have to make about those futures. And we came out with an extraordinarily rich set of discussions. And that's been summarized in this report that's available for you to take a look at after you leave. But it's 40 pages of synthesis of the discussion that was held there. And again, very rich discussion with everybody participating very actively. What I wanted to do today is really kind of zero in. I'm despair on summarizing those 40 pages, but really what we ended up doing after the summit, Dale and the team from the center and some of the Maker Media folks sat down and said, okay, let's just try to reflect on the discussion that was held and synthesize some of the key conclusions or key observations and trends that were the focus of a lot of discussion. And so we ended up with 5 propositions out of that effort. They're provocative propositions. They're extremely early stage. We could argue they're speculative, certainly rather than definitive. But we think there's enough early signals that could suggest some very significant impact of the maker movement over time. And so I'll go through those 5 and just use that as providing some context. And again, they're all summarized in more detail in that report on the summit. And we have even handy cards that summarize each of the propositions individually and give a little bit of the support for them. And as you'll see as we go through the propositions, they are not standalone. They're not just silos of observations. They all connect and interact with each other in some powerful ways. And we think that's part of what makes the power of this movement, is that interaction and integration of many different strands. So the first proposition that we have, and they're summarized here, I'm going to take some liberties with the wording, but the first proposition has to do with the role of the maker movement as a catalyst for employment. And this is part of a broader perspective that we have on what we call the big shift that's occurring in the global business economy. But we have an interesting situation of mounting performance pressure on large companies around the world. And the reaction of those companies is to fall back on old habits, at least initially, which is something that we call scalable efficiency. It's how do I get lower cost to stay in the game for the next quarter at least, if not the next year. And so there have been layoffs after layoffs. There's an increasing focus on automation. Wherever possible, replace a human being with a computer or a robot. They're less expensive, they're more reliable, they don't complain. That's an optimal situation. And we expect for a variety of reasons that that trend is actually going to continue in large enterprises. And I will say that part of our view is that large enterprises in one form will continue to exist. We're not proponents of the view that everything's going to fragment and we're all going to become small entrepreneurs. But there will be large enterprises, but they will be heavily automated. And so the per capita employment of those large enterprises is going to be relatively small. And in contrast, in parallel, we see the maker movement creating opportunities for people to earn an income, earn a living through making activity. By providing them with the tools of production, the means of production, providing them with platforms where they can connect with each other, platforms where they can connect with the customers that might be interested in the products they're making. All of that creates the opportunity for a very vibrant economy that is going to employ more and more people. And arguably over time, to be, again, provocative and extreme about it, I would suggest that the maker space will ultimately account for the bulk of the employment in the economy. We'll still have large enterprises that will be quite significant, but they won't have a lot of people in them. Most of the people will be in these maker spaces and initiatives and ventures. I mean, there are lots of early signals that give some indication of this trend in process. You're all familiar, I'm sure, with Etsy, this platform that allows makers to connect with customers. Etsy now has, let's see, over 1 million stores on the site, representing people who are making things, wanting to sell things. And last year represented over $1 billion, I think $1.3 billion in sales. So, and very rapidly growing, significant commercial enterprises emerging. Now again, on average, not enough. Most of these people on Etsy still, I would say, are hobbyists. They're doing it on the side. They have a main job, but they're doing this on the side and earning some additional income. But over time, the trend is more and more of those people are earning their primary income through their making activity on Etsy. So that's one of the trends and propositions that we have here. There's a second trend and proposition that's related to that, which is this notion that we believe the maker movement has the potential to be extremely disruptive for large enterprises. And particularly around the notion of designing and commercializing products in the marketplace. Most large enterprises, in one form or another, are designing and delivering products to the marketplace. And that's exactly where the maker movement is coming in. And first of all, leveraging a trend that we see on the consumer side, which is consumers more and more wanting to see uniqueness of products, something that's really special and unique to them. It's customization or tailoring or personalization of products. All of that is driving an unmet need, a growing sense of demand in the marketplace. And on the supply side, you have the maker movement coming in to say, wow, we can address that need. That's exactly what we're about. And so over time, we see more and more of the maker enterprises chipping away at the product businesses of these large enterprises, disrupting that core revenue stream that the large enterprises have today. Now, at the end of the day, we would suggest, again, that large enterprises will continue to exist in a different form, perhaps, than they do today, but that their role in the economy over time is going to be much less around designing and commercializing products in the marketplace, and much more around providing scale infrastructure to those who design and commercialize products. So everything from offering contract manufacturing facilities to makers who want to scale their products, offering logistics services, offering data center services. All of those kinds of things still will be very scale intensive and will support large enterprises, but they're going to need to become much more focused on that kind of infrastructure activity. There's another option for large enterprises which is more speculative. There aren't a lot of great examples of it yet, but it's a notion of what we call becoming a trusted advisor or a customer relationship business. It's getting to know a set of customers extremely deeply and based on that knowledge, becoming more and more helpful to them in connecting to the right products and resources at the relevant time. Very different kind of business model. It requires large companies to go across the table rather than pushing products and services to customers and just trying to sell more. It's cross the table and become an advisor to the customer and help them figure out what's most relevant to them at the most appropriate time for them. So that's a very different model of what a large enterprise would look like in the future. But at the end of the day, we see a very interesting kind of synergy between the maker movement and these new form large enterprises where they're helping each other. That the fragmentation of the maker movement is actually going to support these large enterprises in terms of the kinds of infrastructures and platforms that they provide, as well as this customer relationship business becoming more and more central. One of the impacts of the maker movement, we believe, is a proliferation of products out there. And not just more and more products, but more and more rapidly evolving products. So as a consumer, trying to stay ahead of all that and figure out what's really most relevant to me becomes a key unmet need that, again, a large enterprise in the form of a customer relationship business could provide. So that's a second proposition. There's a third proposition, again, all of these are related, which is that the impact of the maker movement is to fundamentally reframe both manufacturing activity and retailing activity. And on the manufacturing side, we see an interesting movement. Today, manufacturing is largely dominated by very high-scale production, assembly lines that produce millions of units, if not tens of millions of units. And that increasingly, over time, there is going to be a demand for manufacturing activities that are much more the job shop kind of manufacturing activity. Maybe 5,000 units, maybe 10,000 units, but certainly not 1 million units. And most manufacturing facilities today are not optimized for that kind of activity. We see a whole new range of enterprises coming into the marketplace to provide highly distributed job shop manufacturing services to the maker movement, to the proliferation of products that are coming into the marketplace. So that's one thing on the manufacturing side. On the retailing side, what we've got today is the dominance of the big box retailers. And we see an interesting kind of split driven again by the maker movement. On the one hand, we see the maker movement as driving further growth of online retailing. Because again, with the proliferation of products out there driven by the maker movement, scarce shelf space still remains an issue. Even if you're a big box retailer, you only have a certain number of feet of shelf space. So you can't represent every product out there. Online retailers can. In virtual worlds, there is no scarcity of shelf space. It's infinite. So offering full choice is an option that we think will drive the growth of online retailers. And then on the flip side, you've got a parallel development, which is the emergence of a next generation of mom and pop retailing. The small, highly specialized retailers who are going to come in and connect with particular customer niches, small customer niches, highly specialized niches, curate the right products for that niche in their stores, provide an environment where they can showcase those products, provide an environment where they can help customers learn about those products and how to use them more effectively, and ultimately, potentially how to modify them to their own needs, and provide an environment where customers can connect with each other when they're really passionate about a certain type of product and share their experiences with each other. That's a very different function for a retailer than the big box retailer that's saying you got convenience of choice and low price. A different proposition. We think both parallel efforts in retailing are going to grow as a result of the maker movement. So that's the third proposition. There's a fourth one which bridges from the commercial space more into the education market space. And in that environment, again, we see the maker movement as having a very disruptive impact. The disruptive impact here is if you think about the maker movement and the maker spaces that are emerging around the country and around the world, what they really are in one dimension at least is learning environments. They are creating an opportunity for all of us to learn, and not just learn grades through 1 through 12 or college or graduate school, lifetime learning. And increasingly, we're in a world where we are going to have to learn throughout our lifetime. Those of us who don't learn are going to fall further and further behind. And the maker movement provides a great environment to accelerate and amplify and reinforce that learning. But it's a different kind of learning. It's a learning that has to do much more with practice than theory. The whole philosophy of the maker movement is stop talking and start making, and learn as you go through iterations. And that's a very different model than the traditional educational institutions, where it's still about theory over practice. You sit in a classroom and listen to lectures and you absorb the theory, and someday hopefully you'll apply it somewhere. Very different kind of model, and so again we think very disruptive to the traditional model of education. Now, there are some early initiatives that suggest that at least some educational institutions, we'll be hearing about a couple of them further into the program, but at least some of the educational institutions are starting to figure out that they need to make a transition, that this whole movement towards lifelong learning and being focused on practice versus theory implies a very different kind of model that the educational institutions are going to have to adapt to. So, fourth kind of provocative proposition. As if that weren't enough, there's a fifth one, which is that the opportunity we see for the maker movement is increasingly to pull in edge communities into the core of our society. There are a whole range of edge communities, everybody from disadvantaged people to youth who can't find a job, to older people who are in the process of retiring but don't really want to retire. They want to stay involved in some way and make a difference. Create an opportunity to pull those people in, provide them with access through shared facilities to the means of production so they can start making things themselves, provide them with platforms where they can connect with others to help them build businesses around their making activity, and integrate them more effectively into society. And we think in that context it's going to certainly reinforce the growth of urban society, that cities will become the convening points for a lot of these edge communities to begin to learn from each other and connect with a broader set of resources that can help them build successful businesses. So that's an opportunity, and over time cities will become really vibrant social entities driving this learning and production activity. There's also the local commerce movement that we think the maker movement is going to help to reinforce. This whole notion of wanting to connect with local producers and develop relationships with local producers, not just buy a product off a shelf, not knowing who made it or why they made it or how they made it, but connecting in a much deeper way with local producers. The maker movement becomes, I think, a key catalyst to amplify that whole trend as well. So at the end of the day, we've got some very significant trends that we see emerging and a very broad impact that the maker movement can have on our broader society and economy. At the end of the day, it's really a very disruptive movement, we believe. It's driven by a set of technologies that are moving from bits to atoms. You know, if you think about the past couple of decades, we've had incredible technology come into the world that has allowed an extraordinary amount of innovation in digital space. It's transformed all aspects of the media business, everything from video to music. It's transformed the software application development space, created a lot more opportunity for smaller players to participate in ways that just weren't possible before. But it's been confined to the digital space. If you weren't dealing with digital media, you were out of the game. Now there's a set of technologies. This digital technology is spilling into physical space, and a whole range of technologies from 3D printing to biosynthesis to robotics, where we're amplifying those digital technologies and now creating the opportunity to make things in physical space and set into motion all those trends that have been playing out in the digital space but now in the physical space. So a very interesting kind of shift. And at the end of the day, highly disruptive at one level. So if you're an established player, a lot of challenges on the horizon. But as individuals, our belief is the maker movement is creating the opportunity for all of us as individuals to tap in to our creative potential and realize it in ways that just weren't feasible in the past, and do it also in communities of practice where we come together. We're not just isolated individuals, but we're learning from each other through practice. So it's a very exciting time. We think it's just the beginning. The maker movement has come a very long way, but as I'm fond of saying, it's just the beginning. You haven't seen anything yet. And part of it is the opportunity to shape this environment in ways, economy and society, in ways that would have been unimaginable 10, 15, 20 years ago. Thank you. Thank you.
So, just stay for a minute. I think, you know, it gives you sort of a different framing, because, you know, some people will look at this and say, it's a bunch of hobbyists, right? Or just, you know, you see these things going on at Maker Faire, and, you know, this is kind of provocative to think about what this means and how Maker movement is expressing itself in these ways. I think we will continue to talk about these. I kind of just want to say this is meant almost a way to think about this and interpret what's going on. It isn't necessarily a thing of like being a predictive force here. You know, right. It's something to think about. One of JSP's and John's books is called The Power of Pull, and writes about sort of pull versus push, and how push is push is something like marketing does to us for the most part, right? It says, hey, this is what you want. And the power of pull is when people draw things, when they, and I think really powerful movements are pull. And I've been saying, just from some of the educators, that STEM is a classic push model and making is a pull model. Kids want to make, right? They don't know what STEM is, and if you push it at them, they don't necessarily interpret it that way. And I think there are other ways that manufacturing, for instance, isn't, when you say, do you want to be a manufacturer, most people don't see themselves that way. It's something that they don't identify with. But there are other words and other ideas happening in parallel. You had a quick question in the back?
Yeah, I'm just curious thoughts on intellectual property rights as the market that impact on manufacturing and idea, and a lot of the reasons why our economy is not the way it is. So, curious what your thoughts are on how that will have an impact. Not able to go ahead.
Yeah. No, that's a whole other presentation.
Exactly.
Yeah. My short form would be, number one, I think there's a very interesting analogy with what's happening in the software industry, where you have a whole bunch of the kind of underlying software that is now available on an open source basis. There is no intellectual property protection at that level. But then building on top of that, there is proprietary software that's still being developed and commercialized. And I suspect a similar trend will occur more broadly in the physical products we're talking about. In addition, I have a belief that one of the key implications of looking at the means of production in the maker world is the rapid iteration of products, where it becomes almost, the closest analogy I can find is the fashion industry. And the interesting thing about the fashion industry is there is no intellectual property. You know, you just move on to the next release, the next iteration of what you're doing, and that's the way to stay in the game, rather than...
You're only as good as your last idea.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're going to move on. John, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Again, I said the report's out there. It delves into this. We'll be working with Delisha, I think, to put some of this online and encourage comment as well. Well, you know, I think the maker movement if you look at it, has really sort of this innovation side and the education side, and you'll see that kind of reflected here. One of the companies that I think is really stepping up and doing a lot of interesting work connecting to the maker movement is Intel. And we have Justin Rattner, who's head of Intel Foundation and former CTO of Intel and Intel Labs. And he's going to talk, I think, probably about both of those pillars in terms of Intel. So, Justin, come on up. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Dale. Mind if I sit down?
No.
Okay. Guess when you have a handheld mic, you know, it's easier to do that. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really delighted. We got such a good crowd turned out for the event. I guess I should say, hi, my name is Justin. I'm a maker.
Good.
First thing I built, the first digital device I built, now hold on to your seats for this, was a binary arithmetic and logic unit built with discrete transistors in 1960. We weren't called makers then. I think we were called hobbyists or do-it-yourselfers or something, something of that sort. I was an avid kit builder. Just to continue with my bona fides here for a minute, I was an avid kit builder, built lots of Heath kits, and some of you who are old enough may actually remember night kits from Allied Radio. Built a number of those. My first serious analog design came a few years later. I think it was 1963 or 64. I built a closed circuit television camera, all vacuum tubes. Including the imaging device, was a Vidicon. Now you might ask, you know, where a 14-year-old would find a Vidicon that they could afford to buy, because Vidicons in those days were hundreds of dollars, way beyond my budget. Turned out I discovered that these American airline jets, which in those days had those cameras in their nose gear so you could watch the takeoff, well, when those jets left Los Angeles in the afternoon, they flew right into the sun, and the sun would burn the phosphors. So I got a hold of Packard Bell, who built those cameras, and I said, hey, what do you do with those Vidicons that have those sunburned phosphors? And the guy says, I don't know, I've got hundreds of them in a box here. You're welcome to come on down and pick one of the better ones out. So I literally took the bus to South Los Angeles, and we just sat there for an hour with one of his cameras looking for the best Vidicon. I actually had to build that camera twice. The first design was a failure, and you learn from failure like nothing else. And the second design was a success. I remember I had the camera pointed outside, and I didn't think it was quite working, and then a car drove by. Oh my God, that was the most thrilling moment of my entire 14, 15-year-old life when I actually saw movement on my camera. It took me to the Western States Science Fair in I think it would have to be 64. I don't know if you could go beyond the Western States Science Fair in 1964, but that was sort of my last stop. I won't bore you with many of these other things other than to say I'm still making stuff. So I'm, what does that make me? About a 50-year-old, a little older maker. I bought this weather station during the holidays last year at Costco. It's wireless, doesn't have very good range. So I decided to turn the wind sensor into a corner reflector antenna, which just requires a piece of sheet metal bent 90 degrees. I really could use one of those breaks that I saw when I was walking past the floor here at the Techshop. Unfortunately, I didn't pack my piece of sheet metal, so I'll have to go home and bend it when I get home. But I think that's going to give me plenty of range. So I happened to meet Dale at one of the most interesting innovation panels I ever attended. That was quite a day. I would say 4 or 5 years ago, probably. You know, and Dale exposed this group of tech industry executives to the concept of the maker and of making stuff. And I think we had a great discussion that day, and I think it really challenged everyone's thinking since we tend to talk about making things. Well, at Intel we talk about making things in the hundreds of millions, right? You can't put $6 or $7 billion into a chip plant and build anything less than about 1 billion things over the life of that factory and stay in business. It's a very capital-intensive operation. Unless somebody comes up with a desktop chip maker, I think we're relatively secure in that future. So, as president of the Intel Foundation, my primary job and the mission of the foundation is to advance STEM education, principally in the K through 12 grades. We do a little bit at the undergraduate level, but not too much, and even less at the graduate level. So most of our focus is on K through 12, and much of that has to do with just getting kids interested in, I think as John put it, the acronym that no kid actually understands, which is STEM, for science, technology, engineering, and math. I actually prefer the acronym STEAM because I like to get art and design into that, and that's another important lesson from the maker community, which is the relevance of design. It's not just putting something together, tightening the screws and declaring victory. It's really when you get done, do you have something that's attractive and usable. We put a lot of money into this. We sponsor the Intel International Science and Engineering Fair, ISEF, which just took place last month in Los Angeles. About 1,700 kids participate in the science fair. The exhibit floor is just gigantic. It takes the LA Convention Center to host the event. There are about 5,000 people overall, and I think some days, they have one day where it's open to the public. I think they had 9,000 people attending that day. 9,000 people crossed the turnstile into the LA Convention Center. And all those kids, all 1,700 kids from all over the world, are basically makers in their own right. And what they make is really amazing. And a lot of these kids are clearly going on to successful careers in science and technology and engineering and so forth, mathematics as well. It was so much fun. They get to interview a panel of Nobelists, and it's really, it's just a delight to hear their questions. Did people think you were really weird when you were interested in science, in high school? And of course, all of them say, absolutely. In fact, one of the kids I was talking to said that he didn't care whether he won or not at the science fair, just to be in a hall with so many other kids who were interested in science and engineering and mathematics. Some of those projects are really impressive. You've probably seen some of these kids on the morning TV shows and some of the late night programs, but the good ones generally work with either an academic laboratory or an industrial laboratory. And literally, we've had past winners. I think Jack Andraka won with a new scheme for detecting pancreatic cancer that's 1,000 times more sensitive than the existing standard test. You all know we lost Steve Jobs to pancreatic cancer, and so we can't overemphasize the importance of developing advanced screening techniques. That was a high school kid with access to the right kind of laboratories. Not something we probably get here at the Tech Shop, although I assume bio is not too far away. Another thing that we sponsor is the Intel Science Talent Search. That is a bit smaller affair. There are about 1,000 participants in that, and it gets down to 40 finalists. And every year here in Washington D.C., there's a gala event where the top 10 winners are announced. About 40 finalists, and then top 10 winners show up for that. And here again, these kids are just incredibly impressive. They all have done projects, and I think they all qualify as serious makers in their own right. Another thing that Intel does and has done for 20 years now, actually 20, I guess this is our 21st year, is the Intel Computer Clubhouse network. And there are now over 100 of these clubhouses, again, around the world, most of them here in the US, but increasingly around the world. And the clubhouses are primarily aimed at disadvantaged youth. Kids that in the early days didn't have access to computing equipment, and then more recently access to the internet. But the clubhouse never stands still, and so we're just in the process of launching what we on the inside call Clubhouse 3.0, which is intended to turn those clubhouses, or at least some parts of those clubhouses, into maker spaces. Nothing as grand as the Techshop, of course, but it's primarily aimed at kids in grades 3 through 6. I mean, we definitely have high schoolers there. And I saw a photograph last week when I was up at MIT of a kid who couldn't be over 7 or 8 years old wielding a soldering iron. And I said, what do mom and dad think about the fact that their kid is holding a soldering iron? It gave me pause. I have plenty of burns from my soldering experience, so when I saw that kid wielding a soldering iron, I went, okay, well, that may be a challenge from an insurance point of view. But the clubhouses have actually always had sort of this maker notion. And so we asked Mitch Resnick from the MIT Media Lab and Natalie Rusk, one of his colleagues there, to design a maker program for the clubhouses. We ran the pilot for that last year, and this year we're starting the broad rollout of the maker space at the Computer Clubhouse. And I just think it has all the right ingredients. Visiting with Mitch last week at MIT, we got to see some of this stuff in action, and it's just really terrific. I think very importantly, there's a critical programming component, and I think a lot of people talk about makers and they think in terms of physical objects, which is fine, but you can be just as successful and creative and innovative as a maker by writing software. And so, Scratch and Scratch Junior, which is sort of the tablet phone version of the Scratch programming language, a graphical programming language. And I don't mean a language for programming graphics. I mean, you move graphical objects around on the screen to create programs is a major part of this maker activity for the clubhouses. And perhaps most importantly are the extensions to those two languages, so that kids, in the middle grades can actually build things, write programs that interact with devices that they've made. So those devices can have sensors and actuators. There can be motors and solenoids and all the kinds of things to make things move. And you can write a program even on your cell phone and interact with these devices. And I think so many of the things that makers are going to come up with are going to have this mix of hardware and software. And so it's going to be critical for these kids to have that program experience along with the design experience. Those clubhouses touch 25,000 kids every year. So this is not, a few hundred, special kids that get to do this. 25,000 kids around the world, we expect, every year, will be participating in these Computer Clubhouse Network projects. And that's just an exceptional number. It's hard to find many programs that actually touch that many kids and get them involved in all this design practice. And problem solving and thinking about innovation. I should note, even though President Obama went to Pittsburgh, was that he visited one of our international computer clubhouses, the one in Palestine, last year, and made some very thoughtful and important remarks during his visit. I guess the last thing I'll mention, and I'll be happy to take some questions if Dale feels we've got time, is the fact that Intel as a company has also committed in a big way to the maker movement. Jay Melican is here. Stand up for a second, Jay. Jay's our lead maker evangelist. Very important role. And Carlos Contreras is also here from Intel. He's with corporate affairs and has a very active focus in STEM, and they'll be both at the White House tomorrow, as I will, as part of that. But we've been working on technologies for a number of years now that are sort of tailor-made. I don't know if they were in their original conception thought of as maker elements, but they're clearly that now when you take the perspective that John shared with us a few minutes ago. Many of you have probably heard about our Galileo board, which is now Arduino compatible. That was one of our first products targeted at makers. The one that I'm particularly excited about is called Edison, and we disclosed Edison at the Consumer Electronics Show, and I think I don't have an Edison with me, but I need a prop. Okay, so I'll show you the back side of it. No free promotion here. Okay, so that's Edison. That's the package Edison comes from. It's an SD card. There's actually a mini SD card in the works. That's a complete Intel-compatible computer in that SD card, and it includes wireless communication. It has Wi-Fi and other wireless network capability. It also has considerably more I/O than the typical SD card, I pulled this out of my digital camera, contains. And I've been around long enough to say that I actually knew Bob Noyce personally, and this was Bob Noyce's vision for the microprocessor. Bob loved the analogy of the microprocessor being the equivalent of the fractional horsepower electric motor. So the fractional horsepower electric motor transformed industry as we knew it, and he said, I expect microprocessors will do the same thing. Well, it took us a while to get it down to something this size, but we think this is going to be extremely important, not just to the tech industry in general, but in particular to the maker movement. These things are so small, so inexpensive, so energy efficient. You know, if you want to build a robot, robots have gotten a number of mentions already. If you want to build a robot, nothing better than a few of these Edisons scattered around the robot to have the robot acting in a most intelligent fashion. Well, why don't I stop there, and if Dale wants to open the floor for questions, I'm happy to
I think we need to move on. We're a little bit tight on time here, but thank you, Justin. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
We certainly talked to Justin at break. We're going to have Tim McNulty and Mitzi Montoya come on up, and we'll do an education panel. I'm looking for, is Isabella or Dan here from Techshop? I just had a question. You know, it's kind of fun if you look here and look out that window. Through the window, you're looking into a mall, and you see, you know, dresses and other things being sold. Who would have thought 5 years ago even of this juxtaposition of, and I understood that this used to be a Safeway, you know, or a supermarket. So from supermarket to tech shop, I mean, it's the kind of transformation that you say, like, you're just dreaming about stuff, but this is a real thing. You know, here you have these tools in a setting. You watch people walk by and they're looking in. What are they doing there? You know, this isn't out in some industrial park. Well, actually, where the first tech shop was industrial park in Menlo Park. But this is right here, where people walking by say, what can I do in there? So another tech shop is at Arizona State, and Mitzi Montoya brought it there, so you'll talk about some of this. But Mitzi is officially Vice President and University Dean for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at ASU. And ASU just announced an amazing thing with Starbucks, that Starbucks employees will get online courses for free at ASU, right?
That's right. Yes,
Awesome.
we did.
Welcome,
Okay.
Mitzi.
Thank you, Dale.
Please.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, we did. So now you don't have to feel guilty about your $4 latte. So you're supporting some, what they don't call them employees. There's some other word for it, whatever they're called. So yes, we have a tech shop. It's actually off campus. So there's a tech shop in Chandler, Arizona, which is about 12 miles between two of our campuses. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about why we entered into that partnership, since we're here at Tech Shop, but then also talk a little bit about how we see the maker movement unfolding and relating to higher education. So one of them happens to be on the point up here, but I think you can take all of these points actually and think about them in the context of a very large institution called higher education. So just a couple of points to understand maybe some points of difference between Tim and I, and then wherever you came from by way of your path here through whatever educational pathway you came through. Arizona State University is the largest university in the country. We have 77,000 students. That's not counting our online students. That's another 11,000, which we anticipate will easily double this year with the Starbucks announcement. We operate at scale, mass scale. So this for us is particularly challenging when you think about how do you do things like what the maker movement is driving and inspiring, which is at some level the ultimate in personalization and thinking about the idea of how do we personalize education, how do you allow for mass customization of education when you have to operate at scale, which we do. That's point one that sets ASU apart and makes us a unique case. And point two is our fundamental mission and vision is tied to two things that are normally juxtaposed and not done together in higher education. So that is, we are deeply committed to excellence. We are the fastest growing research institution in the country and the fourth largest institution without a medical school. And that's fourth behind MIT, Caltech, and Georgia Tech. So we play ball in the research excellence side. The second mission that's not usually partnered with that is access. So we believe that all qualified students have the right to come to and take part of a university education at a research-intensive university. We're the only university in the country whose population matches the socioeconomic diversity of our state, the only one. And that's a return back to what it used to be like in the 50s. So this is on purpose. It is a return back to the mission of the great public institutions, and especially the great land-grant institutions that were formed early and then grew, formed under President Lincoln and grew post-World War II. And so we have achieved that in terms of what we admit. So we admit only qualified students, which means 4 years of math in high school, 4 years of English, 4 years of science. But normally those kids can't get into many universities, which have become ultra-competitive, as many of you are aware of. So these things make us somewhat distinctive as a case study in terms of how we operate. And what we see is all of these things being very true. And I'm going to give you just a couple of reasons why we did the partnership with Tech Shop. For one thing, I happened to have the great fortune of sitting on a panel, following a panel that Dale was on, and I sat on a panel with Jim Newton, the founder of Tech Shop. We went to dinner that evening with Dale. And with Jim and a few other people were there. I think Tom Kalil was with us at dinner. And over dinner hatched the idea of, and I had never heard of Tech Shop, so shame on me, and I actually had never heard of the maker movement. This isn't that long ago. And as we were talking, it started resonating with things that we were trying to do, and I was having difficulty doing. And what we were trying to do, I at the time was dean of a college that was called the College of Technology and Innovation. And we were operating separately from the traditional engineering school. And our task was to do innovative things, exploring new directions in engineering education. So purposefully not being a traditional engineering education school, purposefully exploring needed changes in engineering education. And there are a couple of things that are problematic in engineering. So as some of you may know, one of the reasons there's lots of talk about STEM and STEAM and whatever acronym you like is that we have had declining recruitment into engineering for years, and many of those engineering disciplines are very male-dominated still. And so as we were exploring ways to address this, there's a lot of good thinking about how to incorporate project-based curriculum into education. And not just contrived projects, but projects that allow for a student to bring their own ideas to the educational process and work on their ideas and develop those ideas and extract the learning value out of those projects. Again, very difficult to do at scale, but that's the path we were running down. And as we did that, we were developing and exploring lots of other models out there for maker spaces that would be more free form. Every engineering school in the country has fantastic equipment. All of this equipment, usually, you can find on a university campus. So the first question you get from a university faculty member or administrator is, why would you do this? We already have all of this equipment. And the answer is, you do, but it's very controlled access to it. And only if you're in a certain major, and only if you're in a certain course, and even then, usually a lab tech does the work for you when you show up with your design, or you send it electronically. So that's flawed for a lot of reasons, and that's why theory has become divorced from practice in education, even in disciplines that are supposed to be technically based and developing the future technical workforce. That's an elitism about the engineering discipline that I won't bore you with. But aside from that, this desire to provide access to tools for our students led us down the path of trying to do this ourselves. And it turns out there's a reason there's a business wrapped around the concept of Techshop, because it's actually not easy to do. There is process, there's a business model that needs to be in place, there are liability concerns, there are all these things that the university is in fact not in the business of doing. And so when I had this fortuitous panel session with Jim and dinner with Dale, it turns out we found a partner that for us was, for me, an immediate aha of this is no different than outsourcing dining services at the university or waste management at the university or the running of our residence halls, all the things that are not core to what we do and what is our core mission. So I set about the business of pitching our partnership with Techshop, which is not on campus, as I mentioned, to go back to where I started. It's off campus, it's open to the public. It is also open to the university. My vision of what it should be for us is that it is the next library, if you will, of the 21st century. It's another set of tools that we provide access to for our students, and simultaneously we serve the public by providing access in the same way that every tech shop provides access. From an economic development standpoint, it is a great resource for our student ventures that we support, and it's also likewise a great resource for the community from a prototyping and fabrication standpoint. So we eliminated the control points of single programs saying they have control over the equipment, and it has been interesting to watch which students are attracted. It's everything from the engineering students, obviously, are heavy users, but oddly enough, they're working less on class projects and more on personal fun projects. It's the art students and the design students, but it's also the psychology students, students from the humanities, a lot of students from the business school, and in many cases they're there hanging out, meeting people, bringing ideas to the table, and they're interacting with soccer moms, Intel engineers who sit in our backyard and who seem to be there a lot, other companies in the area that are there, and it is an eclectic mix that you cannot achieve on campus unless you open your doors and let people come in and use your equipment. And so this is what it afforded us. It's a public-private partnership. It was a facility that is owned by the city. The city of Chandler owns it, and this went to city council for vote. They provided the facility. ASU is the primary operator of the facility, and we sublease to Techshop, who operates inside our facility. And so it's a fantastic model of creating access and providing a different approach to education where it is a lab for us. And the changes that we've seen in the students are interesting, and we haven't, I would say, integrated those yet into our thinking, because the students are now taking exactly what you want: control over their education, self-directing on their projects, wanting things to learn things so they can do their project, which is very different than the structure of a curriculum, and as you might imagine is causing ripple effects among the faculty who, and it's not just the faculty, it's the system. We're set up in a very mass industrialized approach to education, and now you can imagine turning that on its head and trying to provide content on demand at scale. So those are issues we're working through now that are very exciting and interesting, but there's been a lot of excitement about the idea of a facility like this being able to have access to it no matter what your major is and being able to make things, whether it is for your educational purpose or just your own personal interest or your own business venture interest. So those are all things that we're really early in the process on. We opened in January, and we are hoping to continue growth. We're doing great from the standpoint of use of the facility, but always looking for new creative ideas. So I'm open to any ideas and suggestions you may have. And like the Starbucks announcement that we just made, our view, as the Techshop folks know, is that we are partners from the standpoint of we view Techshop as a strategic partner and look at this as a convening place for Arizona State University students, alumni who want to continue their education in whatever fashion suits them on demand. So that's our general model, and I'm happy to take questions later.
Thank you, Mitzi. Appreciate it. You know, you touch among many things. We were at this Maker Caucus right before, which is on Capitol Hill, and one of the questions was, what is the role of universities in the Maker movement? And he said, you know, universities have lots of infrastructure. How could it help and support the community in a number of ways? But I thought you have a lot of practical, real examples there. And the things that we see in the university setting is this mix of personal and social, the coursework plus other things that are coming in. And I love the way you talked about the business students, humanities students, others who often are segregated away from science and technology, being invited to come in and play. So that's amazing. So thank you, Mitzi. I'd like to introduce Tim McNulty, he's the Associate Vice President for Government Relations at Carnegie Mellon University. Pittsburgh is one of the hotbeds, I think, today. President Obama was speaking from the Techshop in Pittsburgh, and there's Children's Museum of Pittsburgh, lots of other great examples of making in Pittsburgh. Glad to have CMU here to talk.
Thanks, Dale. Thank you so much. There's no truth to the rumor that the Secret Service wanted me out of town when the president was there, but it's an honor to follow Mitzi, and in this maker space, many of us in the higher education community follow Arizona State. They're a great leader, and so I'm honored to follow her. I come from an institution, Carnegie Mellon, that was created to be a technical trade school for the sons and daughters of steel workers, so making has been in our DNA for 114 years. But what I'm here, I think, to do is talk about perspectives I gained on the broader landscape of higher education in providing a little bit of help to bring together over 100 higher education institutions to support the President's Maker Faire. So in my brief time, I want to make 3 points. I want to cover, you know, what we found in this process of coming together as a community as to what's going on out there in higher education and making, and Mitzi has touched on, you know, some great things at Arizona State. I want to talk a little bit about perspectives as to why higher education is investing so heavily in maker activities, and I want to conclude with just a little bit of a thought as to where we might be headed. So first, let me touch on, you know, what is going on. I think there are 3 key dynamics that we found in our dialogue over the last several months. The first is that it's impossible to overstate the breadth and the scope of which universities are committing their resources and their energy to engaging in making activity. Much of it, as Dale alluded to, is the sense of facilities like this and maker spaces, but it also spans the gamut of new degree programs, new curricula. Perhaps the largest trend is entirely new initiatives to use making as a way to engage the broader community, both the STEM pipeline into the K-12 schools, but also informal science and learning. But it's also, you will also find making being brought into the heart of the admissions process, where students are encouraged to submit a maker portfolio as part of the admissions process. That was launched by MIT. Several others of us have now followed MIT, and the goal is to really try and create, you know, an overall culture of making as a sense of the entire university. I even think, my hunch is you're going to see a maker dorm announced soon at some major university. So the second key trend, I think, is that this activity spans the entire continuum of the higher education community. Major research universities, traditional state institutions, liberal arts schools, art schools, and community colleges. In fact, I think in many respects the community colleges were ahead of the curve in making. They form partnerships with companies, they engage in creating spaces like this, And I think that it's a credit to their associations that they also have had a dialogue amongst themselves for a longer period of time. So the maker movement is not limited to any one facet of the higher education community. It runs the gamut. And the last point I think to make in terms of what's happening is just to note that it's at a takeoff velocity. You know, there have been schools like Arizona State, Cornell, and others who have had long-standing traditions in maker programs, but there's just an enormous burst of initiative. I think if you look at some of the commitments that the president will talk about higher education institutions making tomorrow, you're talking about tens of millions of dollars of investment in new facilities and new programs and so forth. So I think 2014, 2015 are going to be an explosion in maker activities on campuses. So my second point, well, why this huge investment? And again, I think there are three key reasons as to why you're seeing this state of investment. The first is it gives universities a chance to expand and deepen their innovation footprint. You know, over the last 40 years, American universities have created 4,000 companies. I mean, we've played a big role in kind of reseeding the U.S. economy. The maker activity, you know, is yet another pathway to stimulate entrepreneurship, as has been talked about in the presentation so far. But it also gives us a chance to take another swing at the one thing we have not been very effective on, and that is revitalizing U.S. manufacturing. We've been great inventors of manufacturing-related technologies, but we've generally joined everybody else in watching them go to other places. This is our swing at that apple, that we can, through Maker, bring in manufacturing into the heart of our innovation ecosystem, starting with our own startup companies and making sure that they make locally around the universities and in the United States. The second key dynamic, I think, is that making is just like putting research on steroids. I mean, when you have the capacity to engage in rapid prototyping, so you can go from idea to rapid prototyping to an iterative process of then back to ideas, you've just created this far richer research environment. So the maker space is not just a student space, it's not just part of the student experience. I think it's going to become at the heart of the research enterprise at universities, and certainly Mitzi touched on that. And lastly, last reason why I think this is so critical is that the maker movement is actually flowering at the very same time that we're really getting an understanding from cognitive neuroscience as to how people learn. Or maybe we should say cognitive neuroscience is catching up with Dale. But the sense is that while we all may have different particular learning styles, I mean, cognitive neuroscience is really reinforcing that we all learn by doing. So when you can create a maker space and you can then create a space where, say at Carnegie Mellon, one of our key objectives is we want to bring artists and musicians and computer scientists and engineers and business majors into the same learning environment. You've created, because it's a learn by doing environment, you've created a tremendous platform for that kind of interaction. And then the real frontier of that is that you have a platform for people of very different backgrounds to come together. I see that at Techshop Pittsburgh all the time, where I'll see Carnegie Mellon students or Carnegie Mellon spin-outs working with local kids from the neighborhood, working with union workers who are engaged in a project that Carnegie Mellon and AFL-CIO and Techshop are involved in. It is a powerful, transformative force for creating a platform for bringing people together from different backgrounds, because essentially it's grounded in that root that we all learn by doing. So my last point, where might this all be headed? And I want to pick up on a point that Mitzi made. I also want to pick up on John's point about this being disruptive to education. If you think about disruptive things in education, and the partnership that ASU announced is a classic example, the real disruptive force in education is the emergence of technology-enhanced learning. And the first wave of that are these massive open online courses, the MOOCs, which are a very fundamental and important step. But I think a lot of faculty that I know, my faculty colleagues at Carnegie Mellon who are involved in our assignment initiative on learning, you would say that's just the first wave. The real future is when we have technology-enhanced learning that is so deeply rooted in the science of how people learn and brings with it personalized, outcome-based learning, that's going to transform the real educational experience. And my hunch, and I want you to go all out and help make this happen, is that these two revolutions are going to collide with each other. And when they do, we'll be able to talk about fundamentally new pathways to higher education, fundamentally new ways for universities and community colleges to work the K-12 system, and fundamentally new ways to credential people and how people are credentialed both through all phases of their lives. And that, I think, is going to be incredibly exciting and full of wonderful opportunities. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Great remarks. And I just have to follow up. It's not me. It's John Dewey, who says learn by doing 100 years ago. But I would love to see that research happen. It's really, John Dewey was a philosopher of education. And now we have an opportunity to the science of learning and combine those two, because I do believe that we'll discover that the body engages the mind in ways that we don't understand. And that's our problem with schools, is sitting kids in their chairs, just as you've been here for a couple hours. Let me invite Lisa and Adam and David, come on up. And we're going to look at education really from the K-12 perspective, I think. Adam is a teacher at Thomas Jefferson University? High school, sorry. And he's also written a book for us on maker spaces. David Wells is at the New York Hall of Science, and he runs the makerspace there, among other things, and is an advertisement for the mindset of makers there, right there. Make mistakes. It's not the only thing we make, but we like to make them. And then Lisa Regalla is the interim executive director for the Maker Education Initiative, which I founded, and we have other board members, Marc Greenlaw there, and Carlos Contreras. And our goal is to really support the mentorship, development of mentors, young mentors, and to develop maker spaces in places like museums, libraries, and schools. But these guys have real-world experience doing it. So why don't you kick off, Adam, and talk about, as a teacher, what this has meant for you. We're going to kind of go about 5 minutes with each of you here, and then we're going to take a break.
Great. We can hear me okay? So thank you very much for having me here. This is a really clean makerspace. And
it worries you.
It does actually kind of worry me. So I'm a high school teacher. I teach at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. It's got a reputation nationwide for being a very, very good STEM education school. And I like the STEM acronym in that I think John Hagel mentioned at the beginning here that we have 4 years of math and 4 years of science, but the T and the E get left out mostly, and so really I think it should be S&M, but that would be a really bad acronym. If you look at public education, students don't have to take tech ed, and that's where the hands-on really comes to play, and it's really important that these students take these concepts that they learn in their science or their math and they get to apply them. So I see this newfound discovery of the makerspace and the maker movement itself as this kind of blowback from the community and the lack of tech ed in public education, and how important that is. So the book that I wrote is kind of my brainchild of all the experience that I've had growing up in my grandfather's shop. And he was a woodworker, and he built houses for Sears and Roebuck in East DC. So he built something like 52 houses, which blows my mind. But so I grew up, cutting cuts and scrapes and screwing screwdrivers and building things. And I go to school, and I've been teaching these students how to build. And a coworker, this is the analogy I like to use and why we need these makerspaces, and a coworker of mine and I are standing in our lab, and there's a student out in the workshop, and they have their safety glasses on, and they're working on their final project, and they're pounding away and just getting really mad at their project. Whack, whack, whack. So we go back to see if we can't lend assistance, and they have a 2x4 that they're building their structure out of, and they have a drywall screw. And they're literally trying to nail a screw into a board. And so it's this total it was really sad. You laugh, yeah, why would you ever hammer a screw? Well, it's a total disconnect of the proper tool use to what you actually want to do. And so we have these places, these maker spaces, to give everybody the opportunity to build and to learn. And I think learning is the really big key. That you see something you like and you would like to make your own. Where do you do that? Well, I have a little table right next to my hot water heater that is my makerspace, and then I get to go to work and I get to play and teach the students on how to do that. And so most of the students that are coming out of our program, and we have 6 unique tech ed programs at the high school, that students go straight into engineering, and they actually come back and say, hey, I'm a junior now, and we just got to use the equipment at X university. And I see that as a big problem, because really the use of the equipment and the use of your hands and tools should go hand in hand with the theory that you learn in the classroom. That way it's a direct connection and a direct utilization of those tools that you learn from the textbooks and from the lecture, and then you get to actually go and build. And so that's what we do at the high school. We really try to inspire the future engineers, and it works very well. And what I'd like, and I think where we're going, is that there's a stigma for someone who is good with their hands or likes to build, and that they're going to become a tradesperson, and somehow that's a bad thing. And so a lot of the conversations we have with the parents coming in, we're telling them that this is a tech ed classroom, it's a workshop that we're working in. But it's a good thing to be able to use your hands and to be able to go in that direction. And I think a lot of the public mindset for tech ed in schools is that it's vocational and that you're going to go and become a tradesperson and not an engineer, which is really the opposite. And what we really should be focusing on is how do we inspire more engineers, especially with the lack of engineering that we're seeing across the country. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. So my name is Lisa Regalla. I'm the Acting Executive Director for the Maker Education Initiative, otherwise known as Maker Ed. As Dale said, he's one of the founders of Maker Ed back in 2012. And our mission is really to help build creative confidence in all young people and make sure that all young people, no matter what the color of their skin, what their gender, what their socioeconomic status is, whether they live in an urban or rural community, have access to an opportunity to make and to build an interest in science, technology, engineering, math, and really learning as a whole through making. And so we really focus our efforts on a couple of key ways. One would be on adults. So we know that children learn through play, but it's also really helpful to have an adult facilitator to help guide them in a direction. And so a child may come in and be really passionate about music or about art or about technology, but with a really skilled coach and facilitator, adult, it can guide them into things they may have never thought possible. They may start soldering. They may start, building with their tools and using screws and using the proper screw and the proper nail, right, to do their work. And so we really like to focus on professional development of educators and to help them to achieve this goal. There's a lot of great activities out there, but how can we help them achieve to be confident facilitators of these quality learning experiences for youth? Another thing we think is really important is the space. And so we think that it's really important for kids to have a safe space where they can come and they can be free to invent, to build, to create, and to know that if they made a mistake, it's okay, and that they're going to be supported. If they fail in that place, it's still a place that they're going to be supported. And so we really are proponents of working with museums and libraries and schools to help make spaces that could be as elaborate as a tech shop, right, but could also be a mobile cart that you're taking around the classroom, or a mobile bus, a mobile makerspace that you're taking out to rural communities. So no matter what that space looks like, having some sort of space that's there and available for kids to develop their creative confidence. And we also really believe in the importance of communities. Making has been a really grassroots effort, and we really see that communities play a large role in how these spaces succeed. And we really look to communities to provide volunteers, to provide support for these young people. There are a lot of young people out there that may have not had their parents to work in their garage and tinker around with them, right? But they need the support of other adults and other mentors and community members to help them really realize all the opportunities that they have available to them. So we love to see communities at any level get involved in our work. We have a couple of programs that we use to do that. One is Maker Core, that's focused on bringing together communities of organizations, whether they be libraries, museums, schools, and really having them learn from one another. There's a lot that people can learn from each other in these communities. And then we help do some professional development to train and place folks to work in those organizations for a summer of making and learning. And last year we served over 90,000 youth and families through that program. We also have a very community-based program in partnership with AmeriCorps Vista, where we place Vista members in low-income communities to help build the capacity of those organizations, to reach out, to provide professional development, to recruit volunteers, and to fundraise, really, to do this work. We have a club-based model called Young Makers, where we get groups of young middle school and high schoolers together to come together and dream big, come up with a project that's of their own passion, of what they really want to do, and take it and display it at Maker Fair, led by a mentor that they're working with throughout those few months. And then we also really believe in the research. We heard some folks talk from ASU and Carnegie Mellon about portfolios. So we really are engaged in research around making as well. And we have a project where we're investigating the use of portfolios as a tool. We want young makers to be able to have this collection of the things they've done, the things they've achieved throughout all of these experiences that they can show to a college, they can show to their future employer and say, here's what I've made, right? Here's what I've done, here's what I can do and what I'm capable of. So I think at Maker Ed, beyond our programs, we really feel like we're the glue that helps hold all of this together. There's a lot of people doing really amazing work out there and making an education, and we want to see how we can help connect people within their community and connect people nationally so that we can reach our goals. So I encourage you, we have an education community on makered.org as well, so to check that out and join our conversation. So thank you.
Hello. All right, again, I'm David Wells. I run the Makerspace at the New York Hall of Science, and I'm going to kind of go off my script because something that Dale said earlier about it being whole body experience making is, your whole body's in it. I'm a very kinesthetic learner. I find it hard to sit down for too long at any given point, which you guys are doing a great job right now. I appreciate it. But it kind of reminded me of something that lies at the kind of root of my educational philosophy, which kind of, at least when I started formulating it, started with my grandmother, who was a nurse, actually in this area for about over 50 years. And at the end of her life, she started, going into these cycles where she'd repeat a lot of the things she would say. As I was on the phone with her one time having this conversation, she mentioned this issue that was going on at the hospital that she used to work at, and was this problem that people were focusing too much on one little area of the issue and they weren't taking the whole body into consideration. And when are these fools going to actually understand that every little thing you do has a reaction to everything else around you? And that's something that by the 5th or 8th time she said it in her loop of conversation really kind of embedded in my head, and I feel is kind of at the root of what I do in the space and how I present workshops and such. So I just wanted to share that with you. So I'm going to go back to NYSCI as a whole. I just wanted to kind of give you guys an overview of what we do there. We have a philosophy called Design, Make, Play. It presents making in a playful way, basically by presenting materials, exploration, tinkering, and then making with real tools, real materials, and real learning experiences. In the makerspace, we have 3 different types of programs right now. We have after-school programs, which run semester long for 10 weeks. We have summer programs, which are week-long intensive camps, and then we have weekend workshops that run every single weekend throughout the year. And in our weekend workshops, we see about anywhere from 3,000 to 3,500 families a year. And that means families, so there's at least 2 people in each family. So it's upwards to double that, which is great. All of our weekend workshops from Little Makers program, which services kids from 18 months to 8 years old, up into we have middle school, teen, high school. But we really like to concentrate on the whole family. We have a 3-year-old sitting next to their brother, which is a 10-year-old, with their cousin that's 18, and their grandmother, and they're all working together and making something, either collaboratively or separately, depending on their process. And that's something that's really important for us to kind of set the platform or design an experience that allows for many people to enter into it from different ways. So if we're using power tools and we have a 2-year-old in there, of course the 2-year-old isn't going to yield the jigsaw yet. You know, if it was up to me, they would, but I'm not allowed to do that. But they will be using sandpaper and wood and blocks and seeing the texture, but they'll see their brother or their mother or their friend using those tools. So they see these possibilities, and they can kind of, you know, as they grow, they can learn more about these tools. In our in our after-school programs and our summer camp programs, we develop workshops that really allow kids to explore their own interests, but they're also guided, as Lisa was talking about, the facilitation is incredibly important. And one of the most important aspects of facilitating is actually pulling away and letting them do it, which I feel isn't intuitive, especially when you care about people. You know, it's hard, but then once you get used to it, it's actually really an interesting teaching tool. And we develop our curriculum around a couple different, or our activities learning experience on a couple different, you know, kind of bullet points, what I call plug and play activity development. We start out with deconstruction. We take things apart. We ask, what is it? How does it work? What materials is it made out of? And we start making lists of this stuff. And we start seeing a lot of similarities between materials in every single object that we use. So then we start making these, you know, connections between them and decide that, well, everything around us is built up of a bunch of different materials, and we can design and build anything we want with these materials the same way everyone else has. So really empowering them with this, what I call I can mentality. It's like, it's not about, hey, let's do this, let's do this. Like, I can do this, and that feeling of empowerment is, you know, again, to echo Lisa with the creative confidence concept, I find if you have enough confidence to try something, you're more than likely going to be rewarded by that, and then, you know, like, continue. Whether or not it's, you know, what people might claim a success or a failure, I think isn't really something I focus on. It's more about trying it and doing it and getting through that process. So yeah, and then we go into the discovery phase. We see, where else do we see these materials in the world around us? And we start exploring that. For instance, when we do, we have a program called Experimental Sound Studio, and you create musical instruments and you create multi-track recording of these instruments. And so once we've deconstructed the instruments at the beginning, we find wood, plastic, metal, and then we see wood, plastic, metal everywhere around us. So we start what I call playing the room. And you walk around the room and you play the different objects in the room to try to come up with some sort of musical instrument on the fly. So those kind of things is the connection between their experiences and the world around them with what we're learning. And then we get in designing and making, which is super fun. And the kids use drills and, you know, jigsaws and really, you know, belt sanders, pretty much anything we have in our space, laser cutter, I mean, whatever they need to get their job done. Our real mantra is using the right tool for the job, and I say our mantra, I stole that from my dad, but the right tool for the job is the most important aspect. There are, you know, really big frills with, you know, certain tools, or certain tools have, you know, more capacity than others, but it's really about what is going to get this job done the best, and that's the tool we use. And that's pretty much, I think, our programming and such, so that's it.
Thank you. Thank you, all three. We are going to go to break, but before we do, I just want to, Catherine Dash is from Cognizant, and Cognizant has supported the Makerspace and built funding for that, and really appreciate that is the kind of actions people can take to help this get out in our community. So we're going to take about a 15-minute break. Is there a place to go where there's things, the break is over there? Okay, and then we have one more session of panels. We'll be running a little bit late, but 5:30-ish we're doing a reception. Please reach out and meet some of the interesting people here, and I think that'll be as beneficial as anything else we could say. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Really good. Okay, everybody, we're going to start our program again. That got your attention, huh? I know. I'll do it again unless you sit down. Right, Joe? Stay away from the speakers, huh? We'll have a reception in an hour and a half where you can resume your chat. Nat, are we broadcasting live? It's good. I want to thank everybody for being on the Hangout. Hi there. All right. The what? Oh. Very nice. I don't think I was able to get time to do it. Come on, folks. All right, we'll get started, but I do want to let you know, if you don't know here, but we've been broadcasting this event live. I believe it's a hangout, and so we have an audience outside of this, but it also means it'll be archived. So if there's anything you want to capture later on, please, you'll find it online and we can get to the information later. Yeah. Okay, so let me just tell you that the next sessions, Peter Hirshberg is going to talk about the Maker City, impact on workforce development. Bernie Lynch had to stay in Pittsburgh, and but Steve Herzenberg, who's also from Pittsburgh, is here in our place to talk about workforce development solutions. Marc Roth is at the White House setting up his thing, can't make it there. We'll talk about micro manufacturing, and I want to get a plug in for Bill Young just to give you a minute or two, get you up here and talk about what you've been doing, because that's also this thing. Don't get scared. I'm giving you a 5-minute warning here. And then we're going to talk about making for global development, which is Emeka Okafar and Kate Gage from USAID. And then Tom Kalil and David Plotz get a conversation. Tom was at the Maker Caucus days, so you can probably say similar things to you. He said why we're doing this at the White House. I think it's an important thing for folks to understand. But we'll cover that. And then the last half hour, depending on, I saw Lisa's here, but I haven't seen Jay. But I just want a few makers to come up and tell their stories. And Jose, okay. We have innumerable examples here. So and then we'll resume a reception. We've invited other people to the reception that didn't come to the program today, so we'll be a couple hundred folks, other chance to meet. Well, let me introduce Peter Hirshberg. Peter, I know him from the Gray Area Foundation for the Arts work that you're doing in the city, but you're working with San Francisco on innovation. But before that, you were at Apple in marketing and lots of other things. But Peter is one of the most engaging speakers and thinkers about what's going on here. And, you know, I don't tend to ask why people are interested in this. I'm just happy that they are. And Peter has been really out there exploring what maker cities mean, and he's going to talk to us about that today. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Dale. Is this on?
Oh, yeah. But you can take it out.
Good. Excellent. This term Maker City it didn't exist last year. You know, it's a little bit by talking to someone about social media 10 years ago, and then you have to explain it to them. But it really is the confluence of two big things. We are reurbanizing, people are moving back into cities, and at that same time, there's this sense of agency and creation that's going on in the makers movement. When you bring them together, it's one of the most interesting, hopeful things there is. Now, I've spent a lot of my career in the tech industry, and then I ran one of the first social media companies 10 years ago when I realized what happens when you shift the power out from central groups out to the edge where people can create stuff, and boy is that happening in droves now. We've heard a lot today about the economic side of maker cities, this idea that there's new forms of manufacturing, that anybody can get involved, and that's a big part of maker cities. But then there's the whole form of civic engagement and agency, the fact that across the board, people are engaged in creating things, co-creating with their cities as never before. For example, in San Francisco today, in just a few hours, San Francisco is kicking off Market Street prototyping. Now, our largest boulevard in San Francisco, Market Street, is going to be redesigned in 2017. The olden way of doing that would be there'd be some hearings, and there'd be some proposals, and then they go ahead and build it. The new way of doing it is 2 miles of Market Street is being divided into 5 zones. And there's captains of each zone. Autodesk is a captain, the Exploratorium is a captain, and 50 citizens teams will be invited to actually go build prototypes of what that portion of Market Street would look like. And the goal is, what would more active civic life look like? What might street-level markets look like? How could people be more engaged in street life? And this at a time when San Francisco is being accused of ignoring some of that stuff, because with the tech influx, is that stuff really being reflected? And projects like this are going on around the world. You see it with the kind of work that Code for America is doing, where you open up data and there's APIs and people work on the data plane. But the fact that this is happening in cities physically is a pretty big deal. So there's the economic side, there's the civic engagement side. There's also, I think, a psychic side to all of this, which is, you know, makers convey agency. They actually believe they have control over the world. It's really tough to find a maker who's completely disgruntled and pissed off at things, because if they don't like it, they just print it out a different way. So, you know, you bring that together, and that's a bit of what's going on. So Dale asked me a while ago before MakerCon to go off and start a project called Discovering America's Maker City. So I set off with the film crew to Pittsburgh, to Las Vegas, to Oakland, to Brooklyn, and to a few other places. And, you know, what I found was something pretty exciting. So here's one of the first things you realize when you go and you look. This is a deeply interdisciplinary movement, and we've heard about that today. You think you're an artist and you come in, but then you learn coding. Or you're an engineer and you're learning a CNC machine, and pretty soon you're making something. So it turns out when you see a maker city, it is a jazz city. You know, we are bringing so many new materials and codes and ideas together that all of that creation and combination is something very exciting. And this is what you see when you go to a tech shop. You see lots of people from different backgrounds. It is a way of bringing social capital back. You know, when Putnam wrote Bowling Alone 10 years ago, and the idea was, oh, we're all sitting in front of screens, we're losing social capital, we're kind of self-absorbed, which was kind of annoying. As you see all of these maker spaces and co-working spaces come in, that trend is reversing, and that's a big part of it. The great urbanist Wynton Marsalis, I think, said this best. He said, the real power and innovation of jazz is that a diverse group of people comes together to create improvised art and negotiate their agendas. This negotiation is the art. I mean, jazz is about individual performance, but it demands selfless collaboration, and that's very much what you see in cities. I went to NYU Polytechnic in New York, and which is interdisciplinary as it gets. I met with Luc Dubois, whose students there, you know, they're everything from, you know, kids from Asian families who insist the kids become engineers, to other people who insist the kids become artists, but in there it's all one stew. Lou had this great line. He said, everything here is an and. Engineering and soft circuits, fashion and centers, art and advanced manufacturing. I mean, this is a really interesting thing you see in New York, all these influences coming together. And when we talk about the maker movement, it spans from little to big. So you can go out and see Brooklyn Shoe Space, a place where people actually go learn to build shoes in Brooklyn, or you can see Manufacturing New York, which is 40,000 square feet being built, dedicated to the apparel industry. Their mission is actually to reawaken and rebuild America's fashion industry, fostering the next waves of business and creating a transparent and substantial global supply chain. And when you go and you visit that, you see it looks part like an incubator with startups, part like an advanced manufacturing research, what's next in fashion facility, and part art. I mean, it's jazz, it's bringing it together, and that's what it looks like when New York revitalizes the fashion industry. Or Collabra, which is an online site where people can upload sewing patterns as people start building out their own things. And Nora Abustat had a great line. She's their CEO. She said, well, we're kind of moving from conspicuous consumption to conspicuous production. People just like making stuff. And then, you know, you go off to the Brooklyn Navy Yard and you see this enormous, you know, World War II turned into a great making and manufacturing facility. Or in Oakland, American Steel, where 130 artists and businesses have been created. It started as a place to do Burning Man art, and now it's a thriving industry. A maker city is also inclusive And it's a learning city, and it tells a story. I mean, every American city has a maker history. You can go to Pittsburgh, where the president is today, and go visit Alpha Labs. And what you find out there is that when you actually incubate hardware startups, you provide capital, you provide ideas, people don't want to leave, and the supply chain starts growing itself. I mean, this is a really unexpected thing, because you think supply chain and America, one of the problems with startups, if you go talk to a VC and there's a hardware startup, the typical model is there's a couple of engineers and the person who goes to Shenzhen to get the stuff made. So the fact that there's actually an alternative to that, and we're beginning to see that, is pretty exciting. I have noticed also there's a bunch of startups that specifically do this. Tummel is an urban venture accelerator in San Francisco. 3 of their companies are completely focused in this arena. WorkHands is essentially a blue-collar LinkedIn for people who work with their hands. It kind of ignored. There's another company of theirs called You've Made, which is an Airbnb for makerspaces. And then there's Pop-Upster. Pop-Upster is, because we're making so much new stuff, what's the distribution for that? So it actually links made stuff with pop-up spaces. So when you bring all of this together, you have this terrific manufacturing kind of growth going on, and then you have this civic agency stuff, as exemplified by the work that San Francisco is doing with prototyping. And you realize that's quite a big change. And finally, a maker city turns out to be the frontier. You know, America loves a frontier. We are at its best when we head west and find something new. The biggest census topic after the Civil War, what they put down for people was went west. And America is at its orneriest when we don't have a frontier. It's the reason that people like Kennedy's New Frontier or Reagan's City on the Hill. And these maker cities are the new frontiers. It is an unlikely thing to go see cities come back and get completely excited. One of the most amazing is downtown Las Vegas, where Tony Hsieh, the founder of Zappos, has set up shop, not as a smart city, but as a city that makes you smart, an entrepreneurial center. And of the many businesses there, my favorite, or most relevant here, is Factorly, which is set up to create a factory that can make between 200 and 100,000 of something. Now, it actually is tough to go make 10,000 of something, because the metal and the plastics and the PC lines are difficult. They're addressing that challenge. It is kind of addressing the frontier. So kind of bringing all of this together, I think the Maker City is a remarkable kind of expression of what America is about, and it really is, as we re-urbanize, one of the most hopeful stories that's out there. Tocqueville said that association is the mother of all science, and that's no more true than in the hundreds of maker spaces that we have, in the social capital that's being built in them, and the economic engine that's there. And as part of the White House Makers Fair, the president and the association, Tom, is it of local manufacturers? The Manufacturing Alliance of Communities last month charged 100 cities with becoming a maker city. And today, they're announcing that 90 cities have taken this challenge. So 90 cities are kind of banding together and saying, whether we're going to be creating maker spaces or maker fairs or focusing on manufacturing, there's this idea of working together. We're just at the very beginning of this, and this is what we're looking at in discovering America's maker cities. And people will take note. When 90 American cities do something, the rest of the world notices. In fact, the World City Summit is going on just today, and a lot of people, I think, are going to take notice of that. So, you know, when I set out on this thing for Dale, I was looking for maker cities, but I think what I discovered along the way was kind of the renewal of the American dream, kind of with these deeply American threads. And I was thinking about it. You know, the makers movement is all about a sense of agency and liberty and invention. This thing has Franklin written all over it. It's clearly diverse and pluralistic and federated. I think that Madison and Arlington and Ellis Island would all be at home in the maker city. And this is something that's just beginning. And Dale, with the bit of the leadership of the team here and the great work, Tom, you and the president are doing, it's just the start of this movement. Thanks.
Thank you. So come on up, Steve. Our next speaker is Steve Hirshberg, who's from Pittsburgh, and Bernie Lynch was going to be here and talk about some of the work that they're doing in a tech shop there. But Steve is the executive director of the Keystone Research Center, and he'll tell you more. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Dale. And I will talk a little bit about the project that my think tank, the Keystone Research Center, is working on in Pittsburgh with Carnegie Mellon University and Tim McNulty, with the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO and its workforce development arm, Keystone Development Partnership. John Tekash is there, with the Three Rivers Workforce Investment Board. But I'll talk about that in the context of some broader remarks, and after first saying a little bit more about myself. I'm the son of a theoretical physicist and a high school physics teacher who met him at physics graduate school, so I can't make a thing. Anytime something's broken, we all go to my brother-in-law, the certified public accountant. It's true, actually. And again, I remember a couple examples of this. My father tried to kind of windsurf at 67 and then start skiing again downhill, but on cross-country skis at 75. And in both cases, he tried to master what he was doing by working out the force fields in his head. So it was kind of a case of not learning by not doing. But so therefore, it may not surprise you, given my cognitive background, that I'm going to give you a bit of theory. But I'm also actually recruiting people to help with the practice. So Americans are used to the idea that economic growth depends on public investment and on private competition and innovation. We invested in canals, railroads, highways to fuel the growth of the mass manufacturing economy. We invested in basic science that helped lead to the computer and the internet. We invested in public education to provide a foundation for participation in the mass production economy and in a democracy. The U.S. has been pretty good at investing in the most general public goods that underpinned the old economy: education, transportation, basic research. The U.S., however, sucks at investing in public goods specific to an industry or a new technology, in what economists, call industry-specific public goods. In the global knowledge-based cluster economy, that's a problem. And it's a problem that relates to whether or not we're going to capitalize on the potential of the maker economy. For example, Germany has the Fraunhofer centers, some 20 public, private, government, industry innovation centers. As Tom knows and is partly responsible for, the U.S. is just beginning to put a toe in the water when it comes to this kind of investment through the Obama Advanced Manufacturing Partnership, via investments like the America Makes Additive Manufacturing Innovation Center that includes the city of Pittsburgh. Germany also has an apprenticeship system that invests massively in skills on an industry basis, including in manufacturing. The U.S. does have apprenticeship, but almost entirely in construction. Plumbers, electricians, sheet metal workers like Johnny Naples, who asked Obama a question about unions out in Pittsburgh today. But we don't do much apprenticeship outside construction. So I think most people in this room probably have great faith in American culture to breed a new generation of creative makers. I do too. But to fully capitalize on digital technology and the maker movement, we need to find a way to invest in the skills that are specific to maker industries and occupations. So that's where it gets to the project that we're part of in Pittsburgh, where we are in fact piloting an adaptation of apprenticeship, which we call makership, as a way to invest efficiently, effectively, and adequately in maker skills. So the vision we're going towards, again, adapting existing construction apprenticeship, would be funded mostly and controlled by the individuals who have and the businesses that use making skills. It would be based on learning by doing and on the job, thanks John Dewey, and capitalize on the cooperation and sharing and mentoring that is part of maker culture, therefore reinforcing number one there, collaborative production. This pilot program and the makership project from which President Obama spoke today also points to a very different career model than working for big companies for life. So it's a career model more like construction, with portable credentials, with lifelong learning, to keep up with new technology, with frequent movement from maker business to maker business and from project to project based on who needs the skills you have. So again, I am trying to plant a seed and to be provocative and maybe to get Dale and others thinking about whether there's a missing number 6 there. I'm also suggesting actually that de Tocqueville and Peter are partly right about associations. So where am I ending up? I'm suggesting that makers in their movement might need to birth an organization as well as making a lot of things. The Maker Union. So this could ensure joint investment in maker skills, make sure the third industrial revolution honors maker creativity and collaboration, boost the economy and the middle class. You know, our broader concerns about the economy are the gap between the top and everyone else in this country. We absolutely buy the idea that the maker movement is an exciting development with a great deal of potential for the U.S. economically and in terms of jobs, but we don't take for granted that there's going to be adequate investment in everybody who makes things. And so we think we need some social innovation to solve that problem, and then this movement can really flourish in a great many ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. You know, one of the things your talk brings up that I think is an interesting challenge for us is, and I say this sometimes to others here, is how to marry the bottom-up forces of the maker movement with things that are top-down. And you know, what do those investments look like? And how do they not displace? When you said union, which is really an interesting angle to explore, in San Francisco there's a feminist maker space that they've had to close at 100 people, and it's called Double Union. But there are these parts where people are getting together and organizing to share skills, develop programs, find opportunities, and it's important to kind of see that and wonder how do you develop that and go further with it. Okay, we're going to go to a micro manufacturing topic, and as I said, I'm going to. I think this first build project is from GE, and I find it really fascinating because you know, you might know about maker spaces, but this is an idea of not just creating a maker space, but having a business goal around that. And this is Venkatakrishnan. I was practicing that and I didn't get it right. Sorry, but I'd love to. You're from Louisville, Kentucky.
Yes.
And tell us more about the first build project.
Sure. So my name is Venkat. I'm training myself to say I'm from First Build. It's been a month because usually I start off saying I'm from GE, and it's very easy. So for the last 9 years, I've been the R&D head for GE Appliances. So if you had to come and see me, right, you had to surrender your license at the security office in Appliance Park. You had to go through 3 badge counters, and you see and meet me, and I'll give you an NDA to sign. And if you had an idea, you had to sign an NDA, and then we would talk. You know, we'd go through the lawyers and all that. So I've been doing it for 9 years, and GE Appliances has gone through a lot of transformation. You would have read it in the press. We have had Harvard Business Review articles written. So early 90s, we took all our production, moved it to Korea, China, Mexico. And then 3 years ago, we invested $1 billion, and we brought back all manufacturing back to the US. Okay, so we make most of our appliances in the US in Appliance Park, and 2 and 3 other factories throughout the US. So interestingly, as we went through that process, we realized that one of the things we realized is speed is very important. We are in the consumer space. Getting designs out and getting things that people want is more important than intellectual property. And we were simply taking too long. Okay, we were taking roughly 4 to 5 years to launch a product, and that is not something that the market would sustain. So we took a long, hard look at it, and me and my colleague Kevin Nolan was here, and we were thinking that how do we act as a startup? You know, very easy to say. A lot of companies come up, big corporations come up and say we want to act like a startup, but it's actually very difficult to act like a startup when you're a big corporation. And the reason it was very difficult for us was because for 60 years we have been making appliances in the millions. So if you have an appliance where you want to make 2 million dishwashers, we know how to do it. Okay. If you want to make 3 million refrigerators, we know how to do it. But to do 2 to 3 million units of anything is a huge investment, and therein is the base of our problem. So I was an R&D. We have a number of ideas, very, very talented, experienced engineers. We build one of a product. You know, my engineers can, from scratch, listen to the consumer. They're very good makers. They could make one prototype which is fully functional. Okay. Great new novel ideas. And then what we do? We go and stand in front of the business. And what our business would look at it and say, okay, you made one. Now can we sell 2 million of these? And it costs $30 million to make 2 million of these. And most of the times, 99% of the times, we never make a cut to get a brand new idea into the market. And the reason is very simple. If I make a totally new type of refrigerators, if I put it in the Home Depot floor on a retail floor, will the consumers buy it? And we're investing $30 million on that whole product. So how do you make the judgment call? And that is the whole sort of business problem we wanted to solve, and we stepped into First Build, and I'll tell you the story what. So we said, okay, how do we assess the value of an idea or value of a new product, and which is in the retail and the consumer space? How do we do it? And the best way is to associate with the people who are going to buy our product, the people who have ideas about our products. Why don't we partner with them and figure out what is the next big idea? So someone asked a question about IP. I think we figured a creative way of handling intellectual property. And what we are betting on is we are betting on the creativity of all the makers, of all the people who use our products, and we are betting on speed rather than intellectual property, rather than being closed. So about a year ago, we did a research of the companies out there, the startups who are out there, who could teach us how to be a startup. So we assessed various companies, and we came across a company called Local Motors. They're out of Phoenix, Arizona, and they make open sourced automobiles. And Jay Rogers was supposed to be here. I think he's trying to set up his rally fighter in the White House, so he's busy with that. But the reason why Jay Rogers and Local Motors intrigued us was because they figured a way out of how to engage with customers and makers and build a very complex mechanical system. And what we do is we also build complex mechanical systems. We don't invent the next big material. We don't invest the next big microprocessor. But what we do is we as a company or as a business are a maker business. What we do is we take parts and parcels that are used in every industry where the cost is good and the technology is proved out, and we package them to solve a consumer problem. And we said, okay, Jay is doing that. Why can't we replicate it in the appliance space? And the way we are replicating in the appliance space is mainly to fill our factories. So we have got factories, we got employees. We are about 20,000 employees in the US. And if we could get the ideas faster to market and fill our factories, we not only do our business a lot of good, but we also engage with the maker movement and be more innovative. So what we have done is we have set up an online community. The community launched about 30 days ago. It is firstbuild.com. So if you go into firstbuild.com, you will see that there are about, as of today, there are about 280 ideas there. And this is not ideas from everyone out there. It's also ideas from our own employees. One of the biggest things we realized that it's not only for the people out there, it is also for our own employees and the makers within the company, right? So one is there is a commercial decision whether the product will succeed or not. The other is they need an outlet for their creativity, okay? So we got 280 ideas there. We've got 2 challenges there. We tied up with the New York Economic Development Corporation. We are challenged to make a modular appliance system for apartments, 7 feet in length, 2 feet depth. What does an apartment need, and how can you package a modular system? We also wanted people to think about how can you get the experience of grilling indoors. Most of the grills are outdoors. The indoor grills are small. So you got 2 challenges there. And The way we are approaching it is that we are open about the ideas. We would work with the people who come up with the ideas. We have set up a 35,000 square feet facility in Louisville. We have partnered with the University of Louisville. And everything that is an open facility, open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Anybody can walk in. They can see the ideas being worked there. They can participate, contribute. If we take your idea to the market, if you put in an idea, if you log into firstbuild.com, put in your idea, we pay you a royalty if you take your idea to market. And better still, we don't take away your intellectual property. In exchange for the royalty, all we ask for is a license for us to make and sell the product. We don't ask for exclusivity. We don't ask for anything. We prove out the idea, and now we have a proved out idea, plus we give you a royalty. You can take it even to our competitors. You can take that proved out idea to anybody. So we are being open to be more innovative. We are being more open because we think that as a country there are many more ideas out there which we can engage with people and get to the market fast. So we are through a journey. We are going to inaugurate the factory in micro factory in about 4 weeks from now. What that factory has is a showroom in the front where we would sell the products that we come up in that facility. In the middle is a maker space where anyone who has an idea on appliances can come and validate their ideas. It is not as broad as Techshop here because we are appliance focused. So we are mainly sheet metal and plastics and a little bit of 3D printing and laser cutting. So we won't have so much wood shop or anything. And in the back, we have a manufacturing space where we have a manufacturing team. And that is where we are learning. One of the skills we are trying to learn or catch up on is how do you make low volume profitably so that we can sell and assess the market. When I say low volume, between 30 appliances to 1,000 appliances. So if you have an idea, can I make 30 of those or 1,000 of those, sell it, validate the market, and if there's a good market, there's a good buzz, we would scale it up to 40,000 or 100,000 units. So we just started our journey. We'll have a factory open in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And why Techshop is important and why the maker movement is important is we cannot set up a micro factory in every city. And we would like to engage with Techshop, Maker Media, and we want to educate the makers and partner with them in coming up with new ideas.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Venkat. You know, one of the things you mentioned, I'd love to learn more about the apartment building needing 7-foot, appliances. Those are kind of problem sets that ought to be put out to universities, out, broadly for people to be thinking about. I just want to, Bill, can you come up? And actually you're right next to John, and I think the two of you are part of it. One of the things we've been seeing at Maker Faire the last couple of years, John's initiated, so is Bill. Come on up. Is the building of CNC structures, designed SketchUp or other tools. And Bill's a guy, if you ever want something made to CNC machine, he lives in where?
Willis Wharf, Virginia, which is a little part of Virginia that hangs down from Delaware, where it all comes to a point where the $13 bridge tunnel that goes to Virginia Beach is.
But tell us a bit about some of the construction techniques, the way you're building new things.
My problem is that I've got very poor judgment, and everything seems like a great idea if it's far enough in the distance. So if John gets in touch with me and says, let's build a house at Maker Faire, and if it's 6 months away, it's a great idea. And then it becomes about a month away, and maybe it's not so good an idea. And that's about 2 weeks away, and it's a terrible idea. But then it has to be done.
Did it ever become a good idea?
And when it was finished, yeah, it's a great idea now. But so I'm a wooden boat builder by trade, which is the most analog business in the world. And I got into CNC building a boat for her mother in trade for the first shop body. And so I've always been involved in big projects, and I've been really interested in houses and really practical things like that, and got involved with building a New Orleans-style plywood house at the Museum of Modern Art with the MIT Architecture Department and the Fab Lab group. And that sort of got me started in thinking that there are different ways to build houses. And I ended up getting tied up with SketchUp. They were involved in lots of kind of big building projects, and John got in touch with me about doing a wiki house, which is an open source house design. And we built a house in New York. I work with a project called Shelter 2.0, which is a CNC cut modular transitional housing project for people. You know, you need 10,000 tents the first day after a disaster, but pretty quickly a tent's a bad place to live. So we're working on trying to supply those.
Right. And these are structures that can be put together in 4 hours.
These are, in a couple of hours. We were at the DC Maker Fair last weekend. In an hour, we brought one in a pickup truck, put it together, had it up. At 7 o'clock, we took it down, put it in the truck, and drove it home. So I think there's lots of future. Dennis Michaud back there was in the MIT MoMA House project. We're working with him on CNC standard stud construction. So things that are code compliant, you can actually build a house that a building inspector will understand, but using technology to make that practical, make it easy for homeowners.
Yeah. John, just talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, in some ways, the other side of this is these designs become like open source models that can propagate easily.
Yeah, my background is architecture and design, making buildings, and SketchUp, the product that I've worked on for years now, was really designed for architects. But I think what's exciting about tools like ShopBots is that all of a sudden you can take an idea about the house that you live in or a structure that you're going to spend a lot of time in, and you can actually go straight from the concept of that thing, from the design of that thing, right into the fabrication of it. And that's really exciting. You know, we talk a lot about how manufacturing and consumer products and those kinds of things are getting easier and easier to build at lower and lower volumes. But you know, one thing that probably everybody who has a house has in common is that they've worked on that house. They somewhere swung a hammer or cut a piece of wood or something like that. And it's a really primal kind of making act as well. And I'm excited to be able to do that kind of stuff in the context of great machine tools. You know?
Great. So the thing, I just want to make maybe a connection to the maker cities. What if we found some cities out there that needed low-income housing, or even just temporary housing that could be built really from the ground up and create communities? So we're kind of looking for some project like that. But thank you guys for your work, and I just want to highlight that. David Plotz, where's David? There he is in the back. We're going to swap sessions here. We're going to bring up Tom. Kalil, Tom is works for the Office of Science and Technology Policy, and he has been just a very important advocate for the maker movement. The White House Maker Fair is really his doing, I will say. And I'm really glad to have him here and talk both on camera and to the audience here a bit about why this is important in the first place. And David Plotz is editor-in-chief of Slate, and Mitzi mentioned a panel we were on, and I think David was part of that. So it's a connection that goes back a few years. But David jumped when I asked him if he'd just come on and join us. And just I really like having some outside perspectives come in here, people that aren't necessarily on the inside, getting back to what John Hagel said earlier. So Tom will lead it, and David, I hope you'll ask some good questions.
All right. Thank you all very much. So Tom, how did there come to be a maker fair at the White House?
So one of the things that the president has the ability to do is to call attention to things. And when he first came in, he said, you know, if you win the NCAA or the Super Bowl, you get to come to the White House. The same thing should be true if you win the Intel Science and Engineering Festival or first robotics competition. And so the president does these types of events for two reasons. One is to call attention to something that he thinks is important. And the second is to try to serve as a catalyst for both public and private actions that will help advance the ball in some particular area. And the reason the president thinks that the maker movement is important is that it advances a number of goals that he thinks are important. So inspiring more young people to excel in STEM, promoting innovation and entrepreneurship in manufacturing, and advancing values and dispositions that are worthwhile in themselves. So things like curiosity and invention and tinkering and the sense of agency that people were talking about.
So, in what's going to be there? And is there anything that's really dangerous that the Secret Service had to vet to make sure that it wouldn't attack the president?
Yeah,
I'm actually totally serious about that.
The 14-foot robot with the laser beam shooting out of their eyes, that was really a tough sell to get by the Secret Service. So there'll be some great things there. So previous speaker talked about Factorly. So Jen McCabe, who is building a factory for maker projects in Las Vegas, is going to be there. There's a woman who used a Techshop to develop an incubator for newborn infants, prematurely born infants in developing countries. She figured out how to reduce the cost of an incubator by 1% and do it without electricity. So I think that's really important. One of the things I'm most excited about is what Dale mentioned, which is how do we increase the diversity and importance of the problems that we're exposing makers to? Because we're going to be at the point where the sort of sky's the limit in terms of what it is that people can design and prototype and manufacture and distribute. And then the question is, what are some of the problems that are worth working on, whether it's related to sustainability or helping to alleviate poverty at home or abroad, or figuring out how we're going to build a solar system civilization, or accelerate the transition to a low carbon economy. So what are the big important problems that we can get more makers fired up to work on?
So that goes to, I think, an important question, which is the maker movement is communitarian, libertarian, small scale. It works. It's a grassroots kind of movement. It's people working intrinsically at a small scale, at the scale of the self.
Yes.
So how does that work with the federal government, which is the largest institution in the United States, the embodiment of bigness? So how do you take the size that you have, the power that you have, but use it for a movement which is basically individuals?
So that's a great question. And one has been to try to build coalitions of individuals and organizations that are interested in embracing this. So there'll be some exciting announcements coming from colleges and universities that Tim McNulty from Carnegie Mellon University has been helping to organize. And today, over 90 mayors took the Mayor's Maker Challenge and released a mayor's action report on all the steps that they're taking. And the other thing is we're also trying to figure out what are the right types of interfaces between the federal government, which, as you pointed out, is large, and individuals and small nonprofit organizations. So one example is there is now a consortium of all the people who are at makerspaces who are interested in citizen exploration of space. So they have formed a nonprofit organization, and so that allows NASA and DARPA and other agencies that are interested in tapping into the creativity of makers who are interested in space to be able to work with, an anarcho-syndicalist collective. Is
that how you describe yourself?
So I think that is...
can barely all stay together in the same room.
Those are some of the models that we need to begin to experiment with.
Just going back to the president for a second. So the president is a lawyer. We've had one president who's had a patent. Does anyone know who the president with a patent is? Lincoln is the right answer. Abraham Lincoln is the only president with a patent. We have, basically, if you look at Congress, there are doctors, there are essentially no scientists. We increasingly have, in at least the national political culture, a divide between science and the rest and it. How can your work in your office and also the maker movement help bridge that?
Well, so a couple things. One is it's our job to bring new ideas to the attention of the president. So in 2012, for example, a group of neuroscientists and nanoscientists were at a workshop together, and they came up with the idea for what would ultimately become the BRAIN Initiative, which is something that the president embraced in his 2013 State of the Union and did a whole event on it in the East Room in April 2013, and a group of scientists and engineers came together to develop a 12-year roadmap for the NIH component of that. So that's one thing we do, is we make sure that the president is being exposed to really important ideas that have the potential to be transformational, and occasionally he will say, yes, this is something that I want to support. The other thing that we have to do is to get more people interested in service. So one of the things that Todd Park has done is to create something called the Presidential Innovation Fellow. And so these are some of America's top IT experts who are coming into the federal government and recognizing that there are huge opportunities to improve the way that the federal government uses information technology to make government more transparent and improve the delivery of government services. And they will say, look, I have been a top engineer at Facebook or Twitter or Google, and I can tell you that this is the most meaningful thing that I've ever worked on because it determined whether or not 7 million people got health insurance or not. So I think there are really meaningful problems to work on, and I think we have to do better at highlighting what those are, and not asking people to come to the government for 30 years, but to come in and do a tour of duty and leave with an increased appreciation of both the challenges and opportunities associated with public service. And so that's what Jen Palka, who is a founder of Code for America, just did. And she now has a much deeper appreciation for what it is actually like to work in the federal government, whereas before she was just talking about it.
Do you get the sense that there's any role for Congress, any legislative role around maker issues?
Well,
and if so, is there actually anything happening around that?
So it's a great question, and Dale and I and Joey Hootie, the guy with the extreme marshmallow cannon, and folks from Intel, were just at a joint meeting of the Congressional Maker Caucus. There is one.
How many members?
STEAM Caucus and the e-learning caucus, and it was standing room only. So there is clearly a lot of interest in this. I think that for right now, a really important role that members of Congress could play is to play the same convening role at a regional level that we're doing at the national level. And the reason I say that this is that this issue is built for an all-hands-on-deck approach. There are important roles for big companies like GE and Intel and Autodesk. There are important roles for small and medium-sized manufacturers to help maybe support a makerspace in a classroom or an after-school program. There are roles for universities and community colleges. There are roles for schools, libraries, museums, community-based organizations. And we ought to take the phrase maker movement literally. That is, our goal should be to recruit tens or hundreds of thousands of makers who are willing to serve as advocates and volunteers and activists. So I think they could play an incredibly important role at increasing the visibility of the maker movement and getting people to do stuff.
But what you don't see there is this bill that would mandate the creation of 10 million maker spaces, or that would give $1 billion for 3D printers in every home. You don't see something like that on the horizon.
So there is legislation that would fully fund the president's proposal for a national network for manufacturing innovation. So there was conversation about the Fraunhofer Institutes. What the president has proposed are these manufacturing innovation institutes, which involve collaborations between government, industry, and academia to accelerate the development of advanced manufacturing technologies. And 2 of the first 4 are directly related to making. One in additive manufacturing, which is headquartered in Youngstown, Ohio, but also has important participation from other states like Pennsylvania. And there's one around digital manufacturing led by Chicago. And again, what that is going to do is, over time, with these new advanced manufacturing technologies, increase the value and variety of what it is that an individual or a small team can design, prototype, and manufacture. So that if you were to come back in a tech shop or a fab lab or a makerspace, 3 to 5 years from now, just the range of what it is that people would be willing to do would blow your socks off.
So going back to what the executive branch can do and is doing, what do you see as the key policy measures that the administration can take, either from the White House or from the Department of Education or Department of Energy, or pick a department, that you guys are going to be doing for the next couple of years that will help this movement?
So Dale has a nonprofit organization called the Maker Education Initiative, and the idea is, can we dramatically increase the number of young people that have the opportunity to design and make something that is personally meaningful to them, and use that as an entry point for a broad range of learning in other areas. So I think that the goal of every child a maker is very important. I think all the comments that were made about workforce development and training are incredibly important. And I think that virtually every mission agency could be able to advance their mission by collaborating with the maker community. So if you're a science agency, there are small teams of makers who have done things like Open ROV, where a team of people who'd never been involved in making before developed a open source underwater robot. Well, that has the potential to transform the way we think about citizen science and citizen exploration for oceanography. And that's clearly relevant to agencies like NOAA. USAID, and we have Kate Gage here from USAID, is beginning to think about what are the impact on these potential innovations for global health and global development. The Defense Department is interested in how do you empower more people from the military to be military MacGyvers. So they were trying to solve the problem.
Is that a technical term? They actually.
How do you solve the problem of the hubcap coming off of your MRAP? So they're creating these expeditionary labs that are in forward operating bases, so that soldiers can, once they've identified a problem, they can fix it in days rather than months or years. So I think every agency, whether it's NASA and thinking about the future of human space exploration, or the Department of Education or the Department of Labor thinking about how this could transform education and workforce development, I think virtually every agency has something important that they could contribute to and benefit from interaction with the maker community.
Did they fix the hubcap? Was that a real problem?
Yes.
So what was the fix?
They were able to develop something so that it was not snapping off when they were going around tight corners. So they were able to do with this through a program that the Army has called the Rapid Equipping Force.
That's cool. So you, when we were talking before we came on here, you mentioned you were very interested in what this would be like in 5 years, in 3 to 5 years. So in 3 to 5 years, if you were convening the Maker Fair and the Day of Making in the Hillary Clinton White House, what do you think the issues that are going to face President Jeb Bush and President Clinton in 5 years that you'd want to be tackling, and what will have been solved by then?
Well, I hope that we would make a giant step forward in terms of increasing the number of kids that have the opportunity to get involved in making, number one. Number two, I hope you see a really dramatic uptick in the number of startups that are occurring not only in the digital world but in the physical world. I hope that you have a real maker movement that is, tens or hundreds of thousands of people getting involved in building this in their communities or supporting this within their organizations. I hope that you have more makers tackling some of the really big problems in areas like clean energy and sustainability and global health and citizen science and exploration. I hope that the range of what it is that an individual or small team can design and prototype will improve dramatically. I hope that we have hundreds of cities that have really vibrant maker ecosystems, like Pittsburgh, where you have a tech shop, a mini maker fair. The Children's Pittsburgh Museum has embraced making. There's the apprenticeship makership program that we just heard about, an accelerator that is focused on hardware and manufacturing. So I hope that sort of rich maker ecosystem exists in hundreds of cities, not just a few. And I hope that the maker movement looks like America and is a lot more inclusive and has a special effort to reach out to women, girls, and underrepresented minorities. So that's what I think we can do, and I think that's what we should do over the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, let it be so. Last question. So the Maker Fair tomorrow is not open to the public, right?
Yeah, Secret Service has an issue with having 100,000 people just show up in the White House. So that's why we have a National Day of Making, hashtag National Day of Making, for example, tech shops all over the country are having open houses, and communities are organizing activities because we really think that this is a decentralized grassroots effort, not just happening in one place.
And who's going to see the stuff that's at the fair? Are there going to be cameras? Is it going to
yes,
be?
Yes, it will be
the Obama children, things like that.
Live streamed, and there will be some of the leaders of the maker movement will be there, and also some of the universities and companies and nonprofit organizations and federal departments and agencies and foundations that are all making commitments to help achieve some of the goals I've been talking about.
Tom Kalil, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I know that it would be great to have questions here, but Tom is around, and one of the things I want to say to you, if you have ideas about these interfaces between the maker movement and the government, write Tom. He's very open about this. How do we think about, kind of marrying what David said, the very big government and small government. But I think one of the things we're hoping to see through this, and that's why Peter's talk is important, is one of the areas of action is at the city level, is at the local level, that a lot of these resources are organized there. So that's a good thing. But we'll jump up from the local to the global and bring up Kate and Emeka. Where's Emeka? Oh, there you are. Come on up. So I think it's important. Actually, one of the ideas that's really underpinning this movement is that it's not just something that is in California or in America, but it is influencing and changing things around the world. So let me introduce Emeka Okafar. Has done many things with TED, but he organized many of the early Maker Faire Africas, and he can talk about that. But what I loved about what Emeka said to me when they originally said, I want to do a Maker Faire in Africa, which surprisingly not many people really do say, is that I wanted to showcase what local Africans are making. I don't want to bring in a bunch of stuff from the outside and call that a Maker Faire. I want to focus on that. And again, goes back to that sort of local. And Kate Gage is with USAID, and I'll let you describe your position there. But I was delighted to learn she's John Gage's daughter, who I ran into at Maker Faire and talked about these crazy ideas. And he's a wise, thoughtful man. Used to be at Sun Microsystems, but it's great to have that connection. So both of you, carry on.
Well, I remember running into Dale, I think it was in 2009, and it was an event in San Francisco, and at the time, I, along with a few other people, were looking at the space of Africa, ingenuity and innovation that we had come across, but was something that you typically didn't see. And it was important for us to think about how do you showcase people who were natural problem solvers, who existed, whether it was in Cairo, South Africa, Kenya, and Ghana. How do you bring them to the fore for a number of reasons? One was to allow them to create a community that fed off itself. Two was to showcase what they were doing. But at the time, we didn't know. We were just learning. What we found in the past 5 years is that, among many things, the maker movement has provided agency to people, people who naturally solve problems because they can. It's provided a method for people to route around the kinds of problems and moribund institutions that exist in the continent. Because these people are just problem solvers. They solve problems because that's the culture itself. And if you empower makers in parts of the world where problems exist, they can solve any problem, whether it's at the micro level, whether it's at the macro level, and so on. So in the past 5 years, what we've found is that this community is sort of self-enabling itself. It has these attributes of being autocatalytic, whether it's in electronics, whether it's in crop processing, whether it's young women who are working in hardware. Something that, in a sense, pre-existed is being catalyzed by a movement that is from the outside, but also by something that always pre-existed. And we think that making really has the potential to profoundly disrupt these societies in a positive way. There are tons of young people who really don't have access to the materials, the spaces, the tools, the education. And whether it's a maker fair, which we're having our 5th one this year, or it's a maker space, which we're beginning to see pop up, or it's a pop-up hacker space, whenever you go there, you see something that is not too different from what you see in a tech shop here or in a pop-up space somewhere in Asia. And when I look at where Africa could be, where development should be going, it's about giving those who have the ability, the tools to solve those problems themselves. And they're already doing it at a granular level. So I just wanted to sort of paint that big picture and not take up all the time and have her speak a bit about what they're doing.
Great. And I'm Kate Gage. I'm actually work in the what's called the U.S. Global Development Lab, which is inside USAID. And our focus is on sourcing and scaling solutions that can be taken globally to address global health or education or agriculture. And what's been interesting about USAID is that for years we've talked about local solutions, we've talked about co-creation, working with local organizations and supporting them. But until, Tom started making all the U.S. agencies talking about the maker movement, no one really knew what the maker movement meant or thought about how it could apply to global development. And I think that what's so fascinating about now, and we've really only started talking in the last couple weeks, but at this point, everyone is starting to see these synergies and starting to see that what this means is really what we've been talking about for so long in a really tangible way. So for USAID, through the Global Development Lab, we have been supporting innovators, global development innovators, people, like the Odon device, which is an Argentine car mechanic who built something that to help in the birth process that he learned basically based off of a YouTube video where he watched how to get a cork out of a wine bottle. And he said, I think that can be applicable to helping in the birth process. I'm just going to leave it at that. And that's something that's a product that we've supported for a long time, and now that we're starting to hear about the maker movement, we're excited to see that that's really, he's based in these theories, and this is, so we're excited right now to start seeing how we can start supporting both work that's being done here and ideas that you have. I mean, a tenet of the Global Development Lab is that ideas can come from anywhere, and ideas that can impact the world can come from anywhere. So we're looking to see how we can support work here, but then also working with groups like Emeka's group, where we can say, well, how can we also build out these and give the tools to these solvers and folks on the ground? So I don't have a whole lot else. I don't know.
Yeah, and something else that I think is actually more profound than we realize is the fact that we're going to see a fusion of what you call things like distributed desktop manufacturing here merge with phenomena such as local informal industrial clusters that have always existed across Africa, but people just didn't take the time to see them for what they are. So a combination of these forces, these trends, will create sort of new forms of industrialization that will be very different to what we saw in places like China. Because whether you're in Swama magazine in northern Ghana, Newi in southern Nigeria, the various Juakalis in Kenya, you've always had these makers. But for some reason, a lot of the policy people and politicians didn't even see them for what they were. So what we are doing within the maker movement is sort of bridging the gap between these people who pre-existed and some of the folks you have here and elsewhere, and creating something, we hope, or nurturing something that could be very powerful. And it's very bottom-up, it's non-hierarchical, it's organic, it's non-linear. This isn't about politicians in Lagos or Nairobi making pronouncements, literally. It's the other way around. And I think it has a strong ability to solve problems in ways that will not just impact the continent itself, but even the United States as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch, and it's unfolding as we speak. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess my only thing is we're still learning. We're trying to figure out where we fit in this space. So we are open to ideas or suggestions, or, I mean, this is a whole new world for USAID, an organization like USAID. So bring on the ideas if you have them.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Emeka. Lisa, come on up. So we just have some, finally, some quick presentations. I wanted you to meet real makers that are doing really incredible things that have great stories. And Lisa will be at the White House tomorrow. And here's a mic. But you were starting to tell me something on break, and I said, save it. Tell me everybody. So start there.
Well, we've heard a lot about the great hope of the maker revolution, and that's great. That's why I'm standing here today, this hope, right? But moreover, how I first got started was because, well, the other side of the maker story is that you are desperate. There's no other way to do what you want to do except by doing it yourself when you first start. And that desperation drives you. If you think of other revolutions that have happened before, the French Revolution, anything, it's from people who have, you know, all these passions inside and their own direct, you know, view of the world and what it should be and their ideals. But moreover, it came to be because of this raw desperation. One day, I used to work, so I'm really, really into food. When I first moved to America in '94, I couldn't speak any English. And I was really weird. I didn't know it was a custom in America that you had to change your clothes every day. Nobody wanted to come over to my house. And then one day somebody took pity on me and came over. And that night we decided to serve something really special to my new friend, which is the 1,000-year-old egg. Yeah, and if some people are groaning because if you know what it is this disgusting fermented egg. You bury it in the ground, hide it for like, I don't know, 6 months, and it comes out. The white is toxic green. It smells disgusting. It tastes like mercury, but you know, I really like it. So, so we served it to this really nice, you know, blonde hair, blue-eyed little girl named Brittany, and she ate it. And she did not speak. She was very polite, and then the next day she told everybody in school what happened, and I became the most popular girl. Everybody wanted to talk to me. They wanted to know about the food I ate, and since then I've had this huge passion for food. I was like, wow, look at this one thing that connected me so well. So when I went to school, I also worked for top chefs like Mariah Batali and John George, and I would see how they operate their kitchens, how they move, and they had this one tool that made everything taste otherworldly. It was so, the food that I ate from there was so good that I would literally wake up dreaming about it and still be able to taste it in my mouth. It was so delicious. And the machine they used was an immersion circulator. And what it does is that, does anybody here know what a sous vide machine is? Okay, that's great. Yes, well, you guys would be that crowd. So a sous vide machine, sous vide means under vacuum. It's when you vacuum seal your food and then put it in a precise water heater. And I make this thing, which is called the namiku, and you clip it onto any pot that you own. You tap it to turn it on, change it between Celsius and Fahrenheit, and you control the temperature with one wheel. So essentially, if you know how to turn on a faucet, you can sous vide. This word that is French, it's foreign, and it's the domain of top chefs around the world. I wanted to make completely accessible to anybody who didn't know even how to boil an egg. So when I first came out with this, when we first got started, it was just me and my boyfriend and now husband. We were watching Top Chef, and I saw one, and I was like, oh, I really want to save up money to buy one of those. And he was getting his PhD in plasma physics, and he said, oh, we can just make one. So we ran down to the hardware store. $50 later, we had our own crude sous vide set up. And then we cooked for our friends. Everybody wanted one. And we were like, okay, how do we get everybody one? And then we heard somebody getting interviewed by Make Magazine about being a maker. This guy's name is Mitch Altman. And he was talking about the maker movement and what it was. And I came up to him after the interview. I was like, I'm sorry that I overheard, but I think I might be a maker. And then he invited me to this Brooklyn dungeon, like basement, very drafty, unfinished, where he was teaching everybody how to solder. From there, I took another class at NYC Resistor on how to make Arduino, and then we made these kits, and we sold them at cost to people so that they could make their own sous vide machines. It was a complete weekend project. And one day, well, when we moved to San Francisco, we were in New York, and then we moved to San Francisco. When we got there, we got our dream jobs. My husband had his PhD in plasma physics. He was making compressed air energy storage. That is the greenest thing you can think of. Imagine using air for energy. That's amazing. And I was working at Saison, one of the top restaurants in the country. It was our dream jobs, but we never saw each other. He worked during the day, I worked at night. So one day, we were about to get married, and we said to each other, this is not how I want to live out my passions without seeing you. So we both quit our jobs and went to China for 3 months to rapidly prototype our machine. When we came back, we begged our wedding videographers, please, 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 can you help us make a Kickstarter video with a prototype that we had brought back? And they did. We launched on Kickstarter and became the #1 most funded project in the food category at the time. Thank you. And since then, do you want me to wrap up? Okay. All right. And since then, we have been manufacturing, and we come up against a wall, right? We've served over 4,000 people around the world now. Over 4,000 people around the world own our machines. But the thing is, there's so much more you need to do in order to be a profitable business. And for us to serve makers, we want to move production back into America. And at that level, at that intermediate level, we've graduated a little bit from the maker movement, and we've taken all we've learned from teaching and maker spaces to get to where we are. And the next steps are quite murky. We are at the avant-garde. I don't know what it means to be where we are. I'm not even certain of the right questions to ask and who to ask. But in this room, there are very powerful people, and you guys are saying quite promising things. And I know on my end, I have these problems, and it's my job to solve them. But at the same time, when I came across these problems, it wasn't actually DIY. It was, as David Lang says in your book that you got in your goodie bags, do it together. And thousands of people has touched this machine. They've seen it. I've told my story. They've looked at it. We've discussed it, thousands, in order for it to get it here today. And now that I'm at the intermediate level, there's less and less people to talk to. And we need support at that level. And I hope through this new vanguard, as we go and we link up with the government, as we link up with Intel, that we can figure out something where we're not so alone, that you can use us to better serve the future, and we can help each other so that we can do and make together. Thank you.
Wow. All right, I'm going to make a command decision like nobody wants to follow that. That is so perfect. We will end on that note and go to reception. Lisa, I think I might be a maker. That's the phrase. I think that's what this is about, is this idea gets in people's heads and opens up that possibility to them. We wanted to hit more people and reach more people, and we're grateful that the White House Maker Faire, I think, will help other people realize. It goes back to even what Emeka said, is that it exists in our community in lots of ways, but hasn't had a name and hasn't empowered people to think about themselves as valuable and doing incredible things. But a lot more to do, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow. So thank you all for coming today. We have a reception. Oh, I do want to thank a few people. Thank you, Suzanne, and my team, Sherry, and Louise. There you are, Louise, who helped organize this. I want to thank Techshop for being our host today. They did a great job here. Come on, where else do you have like electrical outlets hanging from the ceiling waiting to plug in your cell phones? You're not on the floor. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So, and thank you for our supporters here, and I'm looking forward to a big day tomorrow. Thank you all.